All right, I think we're live. So welcome everyone to another Matt Maran Motoring live stream here on the Matt Maran Motoring YouTube channel. Hope you're all having a great weekend here, and thanks so much for stopping by. So like all the other usual live streams, we're going to go for about 2 hours or so. I'll give priority answering to anyone who has a super chat or a super thanks, as well as anyone who's a member there. The green usernames, they always get that priority answering. If you'd like that, there's always a link in the description as well. And so, yeah, I know we have also, again, a few competing sporting events here tonight. So there's a little bit of smaller crowd. We might wrap up earlier. We'll have to see. But anyway, I see we have no shortage of people here so far. Thanks so much, Theodore, Lanswath, Kevin, Danny, B. Mitchell, and let me see, Vishal, Ryan, Raphael, Anthony, Luke, and Mr. 705, Fook, thanks so much for stopping by, everyone. I really appreciate it. And getting right into the questions here. So Theodore says, so when your junkyard videos, or you're watching the junkyard videos maybe, and it was really good. Good job, bro. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoy them so far. I'll have a new one, hopefully posting early this week. I just finished the edit today, and just have to run it past pull apart here before I post it. But should be ready to go here very shortly. And some good stuff again. It never fails. These junkyards always produce some pretty interesting cars. And it's been a lot of fun. So hopefully I can keep it going. Hopefully I get it monetized here soon. It's still not monetized yet. I have to hit 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time. So I'm at like 3,000 hours of watch time. Hopefully if this next video gets a decent amount of views, that'll hopefully put us over there, and then just waiting for the other 170 odd subscribers to come in, and then should be good to go, and hopefully start getting those videos to be making at least a little bit of money. We'll see, but I think it has a good potential. So I'm going to try and keep at it as long as I can here. But thanks so much for the support, everyone. And Lanswath, thanks so much for gifting 10 memberships right off the bat here. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your generosity. Happy to see some familiar faces there, able to get many of them, and some new ones as well. So thanks so much, everyone. And thanks so much, Lanswath, for the generosity too. And Lanswath also says, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone has had a good week. I had two cool spots this week. First was a black R129 Mercedes SL. Nice. And the second one was a BMW M8 Cabriolet. What sucks is the driver in the M8 cut me off because they're in a hurry. That's unfortunate, but still a cool car. Yeah. And I saw a decent amount of stuff here. I saw two Taycans back to back, which is kind of surprising. But the real nice one is just this evening. I actually took a picture. I might post it on my Instagram story or something here. But it was a early 80s Toyota Celica Supra, back when those two were combined. Had the pop-up headlights, and it had a license plate frame that said honk if parts fall off. But it's actually in pretty decent shape. I mean, there was a little bit of faded paint and stuff, but for a car that was 30, almost 40 years old almost, probably. I mean, it was in pretty good shape, honestly. It looked like it was pretty much all original, and that was the fun one, because I haven't seen one of those in a while. And being able to also, my daughter was with me, being able to show her pop-up lights, because I don't think has actually seen or noticed those very much. So that was kind of fun to look, the lights pop up. And also we always see a decent amount of Cybertrucks around here, unfortunately, including one that was wrapped lime green this afternoon. And it's always funny because my daughter thinks they're cool looking because she's 4, and 4-year-olds, it makes sense for them to think it looks cool. Anyone beyond that age, debatable. But anyway, so it's always funny going back and forth with her, because she's like, you mean the cool truck? I'm like, no, the silly looking truck. But always an interesting sight there. Anyway, Darnell, thank you so much for a super chat. He says, I saw a rumor online of a 2027 Infiniti Q50 rear-wheel drive with a manual and same powertrain as the Z, a 3-liter V6 twin turbo, would be a winner at 50 to 60 grand, I think. I think so too, and I heard that rumor as well. It seems to be a fairly legitimate rumor, and there's a few reasons why. I mean, first off, I think I can't remember the exact source, but it seemed like it was something that was a little more credible than the usual like best car stuff, which a lot of those are just pipe dream kind of things that are good ways to sell magazines. But I mean, it seems credible. Also, just because in Japan, I believe, because that's the Nissan Skyline, and I thought there was going to be still next generation Skyline over there. So I think That would make sense. And also, I'm a big fan of this stuff, as many of you know. Parts bin specials, like, especially a company like Nissan and Infiniti, if you're strapped for cash and you got some cool stuff, on the shelf that's in production, put it together in every package that you think people are interested in. And that's a prime example. Who was there was someone else. Oh, I was listening to the Smoke and Tire podcast where he was talking. It was him and George from Motoman TV who were discussing Infiniti G35s, and how like Infiniti had a real appealing product back then. Like, I mean, and I remember this too because I was a teenager at the time. Like the G35 Coupe was like one of the sickest things out there. Like everyone loved them. Like no one was hating on Infiniti in the mid 2000s. Everyone was rooting for them. They were putting out some cool stuff. They were really, this up and coming brand, kind of like Genesis almost in a way, where they really had some mojo, I think. And and they were saying how like it was really actually competitive with some of the BMWs and stuff of the time. I mean, there's some debate there for sure, especially I'm sure among BMW fans, but like they were desirable was the bottom line. And I think that especially now we know the new CEO here. I mean, not like any other CEO of car companies aren't into cars, but like this guy, he is a real enthusiast who really, wants all the cool stuff to be made. And obviously, again, they have their hands tied. They have to just keep the company, around and keep the lights on and, make sure that everyone can feed their families, and keep, these people employed. But I think that's a kind of low hanging fruit that makes a lot of sense if it is actually going to happen. But I'm inclined to think that one could easily happen because, again, I think Japan probably wants it anyway, and they kind of call the shots in many cases for some of that stuff as well. But also, it's all right there. And it's not like they're production constrained on Z. I think they have, plenty of extra capacity to churn out a few more, of those motors, which is also in other stuff too, I think still, with churning out that motor and, the manuals, obviously, if it's the same pairing as a Z, 400 horsepower. Yeah, I think you're right. It'd be a winner at 50 to 60 for sure. And I think that's probably where they'd end up landing it because Nissan has done a very good job recently of being cognizant of, the value need and, staying in their lane instead of trying to, push beyond and say, oh, we can charge 80 grand for this. And it's like, no, you can't. And, they know they can't, but they just try anyway. There's a lot of examples of that kind of stuff recently, but so yeah, I think that has a good chance of happening. And I'm very excited for that if it does happen. Yeah, we'll see. I'm still a little bummed. I think Maxima, that originally was going to be an EV for this next generation. I think a Maxima EV would have been really cool too if they would have done it with an actual performance spin, and even taking the Aria stuff. That I think the top version's around 400 horsepower. You put it in a smaller sedan kind of package. Could have really again reignited the enthusiast part of Maxima in a way. And hopefully that'll come, eventually still. But in the meantime, I think, stuff like the Infiniti Q50 and, maybe a new Maxima as well. I think that's the smart thing is if you're going to go to the trouble of making an Infiniti version, you have that platform and you go to the trouble of engineering that motor in, a four-door kind of configuration. Obviously Maxima is never rear-wheel drive, but I don't think anyone would be mad about that. If a rear-wheel drive Maxima version of that came out as well. And Nissan has said, again, I think back when their plans were for an electrified Maxima, but they already said, like, don't count Maxima out. Like, this isn't the end of the Maxima story. They've said those kinds of things before. And again, maybe now they're kind of between a rock and a hard place with that. But I think that could be another potential. I haven't heard any rumors of that, but I think that could be kind of a fun thing to, again, give them some kind of larger Nissan sedan because, with Altima most likely going away here, if all they're going to have is Sentra, because Versa is probably dropping out too. I mean, I guess they could just go with Sentra, but I think, it'd be nice to have something as well to get people who just basically want a Nissan Z, can't afford an Infiniti, and just want a four-door Z. I think, that could be something that would make a lot of sense too. But yeah, it's a great rumor. I hope it turns out to be true, but I'm very excited. I really do think that Nissan's in a good direction. They're putting out some great products. Nissan Leaf is priced fantastically well. Sentra looks poised to, really continue to be a strong seller here with this new generation. And, Kicks, again, still doing fantastic. They're making all the right moves. Like if I was calling the shots at Nissan right now, like everything that they've had a chance to change. Obviously, there's some things where they got to wait for product cycles and stuff. But for the things they have had control over in the past year or two, I think they've actually done an excellent job, and I'm very much confident in Nissan's future, and I'm rooting for them. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Darnell, and thanks again for the super chat. And YH, thank you for a super chat as well. He says, in your decades of experience, what is the easiest car to drive drunk? Just kidding. Let's go Blue Jays. Yes, never have driven drunk. I've always known that that's always a bad idea. Even in my younger and crazier years, might have driven fast, plenty of high speed driving, but never intoxicated like that. That's just something not ever a good idea. Even whenever you are in that state, at least me, I was never even like, I'm always like, well, I'm just gonna leave my car and get a taxi or whatever, even before the days of Uber. You just not worth the risk, especially because like for me, like a driver's license is just like one of those valuable things in my life, and always has been. That's the key to freedom. That's the key to doing all the fun things that I enjoy doing, and so that was something I never wanted to, risk. But anyway, yeah, hope the Blue Jays do well for you. I know they're not playing tonight, but I'm rooting for the Blue Jays as well. So let's hopefully they make it all the way. And thanks again, Itch as well. And let me see here. So Danny says, hello, drove a ton since Wednesday. Got to drive yesterday and today. Nearly got killed by an Mark 8 GTI last night. We'll explain that one. Rare spot, 94 Accord Coupe. Nice. And B. Mitchell said he was at a collector car auction. So once again, my spots don't count. However, that 2004 Chrysler Crossfire Coupe with a 6-speed did reasonable at $4,850, showing 122,000 miles. Wow, that's cheap. I've seen crappier ones, at least as far as mileage goes, with higher miles go for more money than that, or at least asking for more online, which I guess is a completely different question. But that's a good buy. Whoever picked that up under $5,000, I'm sure that 122,000 miles, you might be in a world of hurt with maintenance down the road. But if I had to spare $5,000, I'd totally pick up something like that for that kind of money. That's awesome. And he also says, my favorite was a 1929 Franklin Series 135 Woody wagon. These air-cooled inline sixes were known as the engineer's luxury car. And this one had a 2016 restoration. Oh, wow, that's cool. The best buy of the weekend at $20,500. Very nice. That's cool. I kind of wonder where the collector car market's going to go with really old stuff like that. Like, again, anything from the 60s and beyond, I can see there's always going to be appeal for that stuff. I think even with the younger generations, but once you get to the really old stuff, how many Jay Leno types are interested in a steam powered car or, one of the first electric cars from 120 years ago or whatever, once the Jay Lenos of the world are gone and people that know anything about that stuff, it's going to be extremely rare. You'll probably have a few people that can hoard the rest of them, but that kind of falls in that area. Like, obviously you very much appreciate it, and I know that you're a little bit older than I am, B. Mitchell, to put it lightly. So that's something that I just wonder, a 1929 Franklin, who even knows about that? You know what I mean? Like, obviously no knock on the car, I'm sure it was really, really cool. I honestly can't even picture it because I don't really know what that looks like. But I just kind of wonder where that stuff's going to go, and where the age limit is for some of those things as far as appreciation. And I can't imagine very many people under the age of 50 even honestly are like into that. I don't know. It'll be interesting to kind of track all this stuff as it happens and keep eyes on values and see. Thanks for sharing, me, Mitchell. That's awesome. And glad you got to go to car auctions. That's got to be so fun to go to those. And Danny says, I just found out about this. In fact, Matt probably doesn't know this one. In 2009, the Panamera S was offered with a 6-speed. Only 147 were made for 09. So you can have a 4-door V8 manual Porsche in 2009. Yeah, I think the only reason why I think I know about that is because I think it was shared with the Cayenne, which also did have a manual offered for a little while. I think Cayenne manual actually went longer. Obviously, not as cool as a sedan, but I think Cayenne manual went to like maybe 2011. I could be wrong. Maybe that was a little too late. I don't know, but they did have kind of that powertrain combo. And again, obviously not very many people either went for that or they just chose not to make very many of them. I don't know. But I think I did know that because that was back when I was working at a Porsche dealer. I don't think we ever got one in, but I think I just kind of was more aware of what was going on in the Porsche world, I think, back then, especially. And so that is kind of during my range of knowing about that stuff. So I think I've since forgotten about it, I'll admit, but I always knew, again, that the Cayenne manuals are very sought after. And yeah, it takes very little work, I'm sure, to try and port that same thing into a Panamera. I'm sure there's a little bit of work to be done, but that's very cool. And honestly, it might be another car that's prime candidate for manual transmission swaps. We're seeing more and more of that, Ferrari 430s and stuff like that. And I can see, some people putting it into Panamera as well. That's very cool. And Danny says, so he got hit, almost got hit in his Mark 8 GTI last night. He's driving home with his brother on a 50-mile-per-hour highway, and people do 60 all the time. I was doing about 55, and this Mark 8 GTI pulls out, and they're on the shoulder to get some speed to merge in when they don't see a set of Chevy Bolt headlights coming up fast behind them. I jam the brakes and horn, and me and my brother look over and finding the rest of the story here. And they're on their phone. That's surprising. Was a PA tag too. Crazy. Yeah, you'd think a GTI driver wouldn't be the typical just like staring at their phone, but there are a lot of GTI is one of those really good cars that is a catch-all, and there's a lot of people who just want something small but still upmarket, but they don't want to go up to an Audi A3 or something for whatever reason, and they get a GTI instead. I've seen a lot of like non-enthusiasts, I guess I could say, driving GTIs, or at least again from a book's cover, just the passing judgment very briefly, seeing people and like, oh wow, I'm surprised to see someone that doesn't look like they'd be into GTIs driving a GTI, so yeah, that kind of tracks unfortunately, but yeah, it's a shame, especially, I mean, I don't know if New Jersey's laws, but I mean, PA, like, you can't have your phone out anymore. So, I mean, that would be begging for a ticket as well. Crazy. And glad you're all right, Daddy. And let me see. V. Mitchell says that sounds par for a Porsche. They tend to offer the manuals and everything at introduction, and then nobody buys them with a stick, and they go auto or PDK. Yeah. Although there have been, I think in the past few years, they've really had a resurgence, and that has enabled them to keep the manual around and stuff that maybe doesn't have super strong manual buyers. For example, base Caymans or base Boxsters. Boxster, I guess you could maybe argue a little bit, more, but for a base Cayman, like, there's a lot of people that probably just, lease, like, just to say, oh, I have a Porsche, and they want, kind of one of the cheapest ones out there, and they don't need a Macan. I think there's a lot of those kind of people that probably just always go for the PDK for Cayman. I don't know how many base Cayman buyers actually want a manual, because I feel like most of those people are spending the extra money for the more special Caymans. But they still, to this day, I mean, I think production's about to end if it hasn't already, but they, on the configurator, you can get a base Cayman with a manual still. So, I mean, it's commendable they did stick with it for some of them, even if it is only just the sports cars. But Vishal says, hey, all, my cool spot yesterday was a classic Thunderbird convertible. He says, B. Mitchell, what year are the round headlights and taillights for Thunderbirds? If it's round, if it's quad, I mean, I'm sure he also probably answered this, but if it's quad lights front, and I think the triple circles for each of the taillights in the back, that would be the 58 to 60, I believe. I think 61 to 64 or 5 is the Bullet Birds, which have, again, dual headlights in the front, but a single taillight in the rear, as far as single round ones there on each side. Because I was really into Thunderbirds for a little while there when I was considering dipping my toes into classic car ownership. And then, the later ones kind of, changed to the bars. I think that was in 65, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was 64. But anyway, so my guess would be between a 58 and a 63, depending on, again, the information. But that's a nice spot, Michelle. Always fun to see those. And Ryan says, my car spot was at Cars and Coffee. Was a 2014 Holden Ute 6-speed manual. Don't know how the owner had it here legally. Should have asked. That's awesome. Well, very fun to see that. Yeah. I also am curious how they brought that over. The only thing I can think of is, it's either, again, coming in from Mexico where they have a 15-year. Well, even that, wouldn't work, right, for a 2014. So yeah, can't be from Canada. Yeah, the only thing that I would say is, foreign diplomat, or, someone bring it over if someone like is actually, based in Australia and they're, working with the government here or something like that, bring it over. That's the only thing I can think of. But there might be a few other loopholes. There is the show and display exemptions. You can bring anything in if you don't drive it more than, I can't remember the mileage limit. Maybe Mitchell knows this better than I do, but I think it's like you're allowed to drive like maybe 150 miles a year. It might even be a little more generous than that. But that's how people have been bringing R34 GTRs in before they were legally allowed. Now, some of them also did the shady thing where they tried to title them, and then it ended up being a whole thing where they got crushed. But, you could, if you followed the rules, you could have a GTR here, all along and just basically show it and just drive it to a car show and back, and then that's it. You could actually do that. I think that is still a thing. They might have cracked down, on that, but I think that's still the law, is you're allowed to have a show and display car here. Because that's, I think, also how manufacturers bring stuff in. And they have other exemptions, I'm sure, too. But, if you're just showing it at a car show or something, they don't really care. And Raphael, yeah, thanks for saying hi. And Anthony says, hey, everyone, not many cool spots since the weather is so crappy. Only one was a Gen 1 RX-7. Well, that's awesome to see a first-gen RX-7. And Luke says, work's been slow. I hope it picks up. I'm getting new siding done on my house. Well, congrats on the new siding. And, yeah, I hope the work picks up for you there. And let me see. Vishal says, is it true that insurance rates are higher if your car has the word sport in it, whether it's part of the name or it's a trim level? Example, Civic Sport versus Civic LX. I hadn't heard that. I think, the way that I understand, and I don't have a perfect understanding, I'm sure, but the way I understand car rates to go, obviously, again, there's all the other variables you're already aware of. But as far as the car goes, I know color, because some cars are more likely to get pulled over. Red cars in particular sometimes can be a little more expensive. But, they just run the VIN, and typically it's based on, the class of vehicle from a safety standpoint, as far as, injury and death claims, and then also just as far as horsepower. That is, a pretty big factor, but there are some vehicles that sneak through, partially because the name maybe doesn't give things away. I'm not sure how much they dig into that. I know a while back, again, when I had my Legacy GT, for example, even though it had a GT, that didn't give me a higher rate. I got the same insurance rate as a regular Legacy, and they didn't factor in the horsepower. And that was one of the greatest hacks of that car is, even when they were new or very lightly used, you might pay a little more for a Legacy GT over WRX, but WRXs even back then had sky high insurance rates because, as soon as those things came out in 2002, people were wrapping them around, trees pretending to be rally drivers. And so, WRX insurance immediately went, through the roof basically, and Legacy never really did because you, again, were averaged out all the few crazy people that went for the Legacy, which was generally a more mature buyer anyway. But even if you had some crazies driving them, you had all the grandmas and regular Legacies, and that was really helping to average it out there. And that was why I had dirt cheap insurance with that Legacy, and I loved that about it. So I don't know, based on, again, that was, I got rid of that car in 2013, so it's been a long time, but at least back then, a GT trim, for example, and even having more horsepower, didn't change it. But I'm sure there are others where it could be problematic. And maybe with like stuff like Civics, they might, have an extra magnifying glass on that because, they understand Type R. You might be getting into more trouble as far as insuring it goes. Same thing, SI, probably a little bit of a riskier driver profile than a regular Civic. But I think especially with sport in particular, it shouldn't, that's such a loosely thrown around trim level now. I mean, like the Subaru Crosstrek at one of the lower trims is a sport. There's nothing sporty about it beyond a regular Crosstrek. And that goes for even Civic Sport. I don't, you get darker wheels, it's so I don't think that's the case. I think they're a little more intelligent about it than that, but I could be wrong. Again, because I haven't heard about that much recently. My brother-in-law is an insurance agent. I don't know if he knows how the sausage is made behind the scenes about that either, but I can ask him and see if he has any info on that. That's a great question. I'll have to ask him, and I'll report back maybe on Wednesday or next week. Wednesday will hopefully work out with the live stream, by the way, while everyone's in here, because I'm traveling this week for a drive program. So hopefully I will be, everything will work out so that I'll be able to do a live stream here on Wednesday night, but stay tuned for that. I'm not sure just yet. We'll see, because air travel is very chaotic right now, and I'm not counting on having on-time flights. I'll just be happy if I make it there and back without issue with the air traffic controller situation. But hopefully hopefully I can report back on Wednesday. I'll ask my brother-in-law tonight and see if I get an answer. But great question, Michelle. Thanks for asking that. Let me see. So Ryan says he saw a 96 to 97 EX VTEC 5-speed manual. Nice. Yeah, and actually, you'll see I got some. Sorry, I got a hair. It had some fun spots here in the junkyard as far as lots of Accord coupes. They're like all showing up at the same time, unless they made way more than I realized. I see so many of those things. So you'll see all those, including some ones with some interesting stickers. So many good things. And this, by the way, this junkyard video, for those of you who are interested in it, this one's going to be the longest one yet. And they've already been very long. This one's going to be like an hour and 12 minutes, I think. So be a nice one for, when you got a lot of time to burn, but there's some really good stuff. Like even over the 1 hour mark, there's some really interesting stuff. So obviously all the YouTube videos, it's always best if you watch it all the way through, if you have the time to burn. But this one in particular, it's a long video, but even towards the end, there's some really good stuff. So I'll just put that out there. But anyway, Mr. 705 says his spot of the week was a 992 GT3 RS. They look really out of place on the road. Yeah, that's true, because they are just so track focused, but that's awesome. You get to see one of those. They always sound so good. B. Mitchell said all 2-seat T-Birds, 55 to 57, had the 2 headlights and round taillights. 61 to 63 were the Rocket Birds. Okay, yeah, with the 4 headlights and 2 big round tails, right? Okay. So I was a little off on the years there. Thanks for the info, B. Mitchell. Let me see. Vince said, so excited to talk about the new Subaru Baja. Unless you've heard a rumor that I haven't heard. No, I don't think that's an actual thing. But if you're talking about me pining for that, you're very accurate with your guess, because that does come up from time to time for sure. I still would love to see a Baja and a Brat. Brat based on Crosstrek, Baja based on Outback, Forester, take your pick. I'm not picky. But I think there's room for both, honestly. And Raphael says that his spot of the week was kind of cheating. A guy at work bought a Lotus Emira, so I got to sit in it. Very nice. I'm curious to see or to hear how you liked sitting in the Emira. I actually don't think I've sat in one, honestly. Sat in an Evora and all the other older stuff, but not an Emira. So I hope you liked it. They seem very cool, and I'm very happy that Lotus is going to have that here as a nice stand-in for everyone who can't buy a Cayman or a Boxster anymore. Excuse me, they can go get the Lotus now if they have to buy brand new. Daniel says greetings from the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. That's awesome, and I'm wearing my Virginia Tech Hokies shirt. Got to support as an alumni here, although I don't watch any of the games, so I'm completely clueless. If you ask me about how their football program's going this year, I have no idea. But still, I love the school. And you see, B. Mitchell also adds that most other years of vintage Birds had non-round taillights or multiple round tail lamps on each side, right? Let me see here. Vishal says the one he saw had single round headlights and single taillights. All right, so that'd be a 55 to 57 then. Let me see. Luke says, I love the auto heated seats in my Maverick. My 20 TLX, the auto heated seats didn't stay on long enough. Oh, nice. I'm glad that the auto function works well for you. That is kind of nice to have sometimes if the car does it well. Some cars, yeah, it's hit or miss. Lexus can be a little off with their guests sometimes. And Honda leaves theirs on a little long because I just had that in the CRV, and it was nice, but then after a while I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't need that much heat. It's not that cold out, and I, go ahead and turn it off. I mean, at least it's just one button press, but yeah, it's a nice feature. And Daniel says, anyone own a 24 Malibu 2LT? If you do, what are your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I did that generation Malibu back when it first came out in 2016, I think it was. Wasn't one of the more exciting ones in that segment. If you can get a good deal on it and a significant discount over the better competitors, I'm sure, it could make sense, especially if you just want some nice transportation that's not too exciting. But basically, every competitor I'd recommend over Malibu, from driving, interior, reliability, just in most of the ways, Malibu just wasn't competitive, at all this decade, honestly. But yeah, it all comes down to the deal. If it's way cheaper than everything else, I can see it making sense. It's going to be hard to beat the depreciation of a Kia or a Hyundai, and I'd much rather have those, honestly. But everyone's different. So hope that helps you a little bit. Go watch my Malibu review if you're curious to hear my thoughts on how it drives. Maybe someone else can give you some good insight in here as well. And Lancelot says, a friend of mine used to have an 85 Celica Supra. Very cool. I hope they enjoyed it. And yeah, hope it treated them well. Ryan says, we have an 84 Celica Supra at Cars and Coffee. Dude is the original owner. Immaculate. Wow, that's impressive. Those Mark II cars were slow, but so beautiful compared to the Mark IIIs. Worth the slow for the style, in my opinion. I like how they drive. I've never driven one. I've never driven a Supra outside of the Mark V, which is crazy. I know. But yeah, that was always one of the cars. I was always hoping, especially in those days when I was reviewing everyone's personal cars, I was always, hoping I'd get to drive at least a Mark IV Supra, and it's still never happened. That's one of the white whales I've never been able to do, but hopefully someday. And I honestly, though, I liked the late 80s. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but the late 80s Supras were really cool. I actually almost considered one for a first car before I knew I was going to get the Subaru handed down to me. I was actually shopping for a few of them. And I mean, back, again, we're talking 20 years ago almost. Back whenever I was looking at them, I mean, you could get like a fairly decent one for like $5,000 to $6,000. I'm sure that's probably not the case anymore. But I don't know. I was like seriously considering that generation because I actually really like them still. Obviously, everyone likes the newer ones better, and maybe the older ones as well. And fair points, but I think that those late 80s ones are cool too, in my opinion. I considered also an RX-7 of that like Gen 2 RX-7 briefly, and that would have been both of those would have been way far more interesting probably than the path that I took, especially as far as YouTube goes. But yeah, I have a soft spot for those for sure. It's just all thanks to Gran Turismo, I think. And Danny says the 5M GEs in the Mark II sound so good with the right exhaust. I think all those Supras sound so good. It's not a bad sounding one of the bunch, in my opinion. And Luke says, I think Mazda should bring back the 6 as a sportback, like the Kia Stinger, with Mazda's luxury-like interiors, cargo space, and with the 3.3-liter inline-6 turbo, it'd be amazing. Even the 2.5T is a base motor. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought the same thing, especially if they're going for this premium thing. They need a sedan that's bigger than the Mazda 3. And I think they understand this, and that's why there have been some rumors out of Japan that they in order in their eyes, supposedly, for the premium brand to truly be filled out and properly compete in that segment, they need to have a large sedan still. And so, we see Audi kind of consolidating like this as well, with A5 replacing A4, and I think that's the way forward for sedans, is to have the lift back, you have the practicality, and it works. I mean, it's not even just trying to sell people on like the practicality. Like, it truly is so practical, the large amount of stuff you can fit in the back of these. I think same thing. It's a brilliant idea with the new Charger. Again, I know people love to hate it, but like, you can fit all kinds of stuff in that giant hatch. It's fantastic. But yeah, I agree. And yeah, it can just be copy and paste, CX90 platform, CX90 powertrain. So, 2.5T, that motor is usually mounted, transversely, so mounting it longitudinally to fit. That's why you don't see, like, for example, in CX90 and stuff, you don't see the 2.5T. They, have the regular 2.5 naturally aspirated that's mounted longitudinally, but then they have a hybrid assist instead. So I think your choices, if we were to have it, would be the same as CX90 and CX70 of, inline 6, or you have, the plug-in hybrid naturally aspirated 4-cylinder combo. And I'd happily welcome, because CX-90 is fantastic already. I'd welcome a sedan with open arms that's just, again, don't overcomplicate it. Just make it, nice and simple, copy and paste, be done. I mean, it really doesn't have to be that hard. It's just, again, trying to find, the business case for it. But, they could make it as cheap as possible as far as engineering costs go. And that would be great. But Joe says reliability is the issue in regards to, maybe we're talking about the Infinity there. I'm not sure. But like I've said many times before too, I think that most brands are very reliable these days. And it's kind of crazy. I know I'm talking about the junkyard stuff a lot here, but it's even in this video you'll see here in the next day or two, the amount of low mileage stuff. I mean, some of them are probably, grandma cars that, get driven very little, but the amount of still American stuff, from 90s, even early 2000s, that has, even 6-digit odometer. So, it's not like they've turned over or anything. Like, it's showing real mileage, and they're, 60,000, 80,000. That was not uncommon back then. And now, I mean, the giant leap that, I don't know. I mean, unless you have super bad luck and you just have, one of the lemons or something out there. But like outside of that, like every single car on the market today can easily do 100,000 miles without even really needing a whole lot of maintenance, honestly. And like that is a huge accomplishment. That again, if you didn't suffer through the malaise era and all this other stuff, and I mean, I was born in '90, so but even then, I remember, again, I was stranded in unreliable cars in the 80s, as a kid and stuff. And so, we've really, I think it's one of those things where we've really grown accustomed to it and taken it for granted these days. But man, cars have gotten so much more reliable. So I mean, that's why, if you're buying something that's super old, that's where you got to worry about new stuff. You really don't have to worry about most new stuff these days. You might have some technical glitches and things like that, but powertrain wise, it's very rare that you see stuff that falls apart before 100,000 miles anymore. And let me see. Wyatt says, as far as his joke question about what's the easiest car to drive drunk, he said maybe a self-driving car like a Tesla. Well, you definitely don't want to trust a Tesla with the driving, because they are not very good at full self-driving, in my opinion. I know, again, there's people that would debate that for sure, but in my opinion, the best system is still Cadillac Super Cruise, and even that I wouldn't trust anybody, because really what you need, that's the thing about those systems, and that's what gets, unfortunately, a lot of these Tesla drivers in trouble in regards to them having fatal accidents and stuff, is that it works great until the very desperate split second when it doesn't, and you got to have razor sharp responses. And that's that's going to be the real danger going forward once we do actually have stuff that is more full self-driving, whether it's Tesla or any company, is people are going to let their guards down, and people are going to be less good at doing basic driving things. And whenever you call upon people to have emergency reflexes, which is already a tall order for a lot of people already, but then you give them a few years of mostly automated driving, and then you expect them to do an emergency maneuver because the system fails or it gets screwed up for whatever reason, that's what's going to get a lot of these people in trouble. And that's a lot of these Tesla fatal accidents have been a result of easily avoidable things, but people let their guards down. And once you get used to that automation, you let your guard down, and then before you know it, you're driving under an 18-wheeler, and you didn't even look up at your phone because you weren't even paying attention, or look up at out of your phone to see what's happening, because you're just so that's going to really be one of the struggles of and I think this is why the putting your phone down laws are very important that a lot of states are enacting, and I hope they keep those laws on the books even in an automated world, because as long as there's a steering wheel that allows you to take control, and if it expects you to do that at any point, even if it's once a month or something like that, that's, you really do need to have full attention, so when you're drunk or inebriated anyway, that's where your reaction time slow down, and so that's the exact wrong time to be using any kind of driver assistance stuff like that, in my opinion. And we've seen a lot of instances of this. There was a Mach-E driver, actually. I know you're just kind of joking with your question, so sorry to go down this rabbit hole. But there was a Mach-E that was, had unfortunately a fatal accident where the person said they were driving home from a party and they had a few too many drinks, but they figured they put on Blue Cruise and it would kind of help them out. So they, it would be a safer driver. So they, made an attempt to be a little bit more responsible. Obviously, still the wrong call, but they considered that and had the Blue Cruise on, but the Blue Cruise wasn't able to respond in time whenever there was a car that hadn't properly pulled over onto the shoulder and was disabled, and there was someone out there working on it or whatever, and it didn't end well. And so there's a lot of those instances where the car can't anticipate stuff very well still, and you just you need to always be sharp and on your guard. Be a defensive driver. Anyway, picking it up here. I'm not a downer here. Mr. 705 says, I really enjoyed the CRV review. I used to work at Honda when that generation came out. I worked in a new model team that worked on training associates almost 2 years before the vehicle came out. That's awesome. So that's really fun. That must have been really cool to help develop that stuff and work on a new model. That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, CRV, it's still my favorite driving one of the bunch. At least as far as the regular crossovers in that segment. I just wish they dropped the price premium. I mean, they sell phenomenally well, so I guess they don't need to. But that's to me where it always falls short, is just you put it up against the pricing of that versus all the competitors, and it's a price premium. A lot of people would probably argue it's worth a premium, and you get what you pay for, and all that kind of standard wisdom usually does apply. But especially these days where people are really price sensitive, does Honda need to charge a premium? I don't know. I don't know the books behind the scenes, but I just kind of wish I didn't have to say at the end of every Honda review, it's really great, but it's a little more expensive than everything else. But it would help if Honda dealers actually did some deals, but it sounds like they're some places are still doing markups and stuff on SIs and silly things like that. So I hope that Honda kind of just keeps an eye on, because their car sales have been down. SUVs are still doing pretty well for them, but cars have not been as great this year. So I hope that they fix things before they got to kill more stuff off like TLX. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the CRV review. It was a fun one. Just to be in a CRV again, because they're so well done. And Ryan says, have a 2019 Jeep Grand Cherokee high altitude 5.7 Hemi air suspension fully loaded. Have one child, about to have twins to make 3 boys. Well, congrats on the incoming twins. That's got to be really exciting. He says, wifey just bought a Kia Carnival, 3 car seats in a Jeep, no room. What do I do? So you got the Carnival. It really comes down to what your needs are going to be, as far as how often are you not able to take the van. Because actually I have a friend who is not having twins, but just had their 3rd kid, and they have a minivan, and then they have like a Ford Explorer, and I asked like, hey, are you going to get another thing to fit 3 car seats in easily? You can do it in an Explorer, but it's a little easier in a van. So I'm like, you can get another van or something. And they're like, no, like they'll, mostly just leave the 2 car seats in the Explorer. And if they're going to have an all family outing, they always take the van. And, thankfully they're able to kind of, split up duties between the 2 of them. It comes down to, again, what your needs are. If there is going to be an instance where, you don't have access to the van, you need to drive everyone. Yeah, it's in that case, it comes down to what's your favorite 3-row vehicle. You can fit 3 wide in some larger, 2-row vehicles, but yeah, Grand Cherokee is not going to be big enough, I'm sure. The only other thing, I don't know how much you've played around with car seats, but there are some very low profile kind of car seat designs that are specifically designed for like putting them on airplane seats, and other space constrained areas. And that includes people who need to do 3 wide in a vehicle and they don't have, the ability to go up to a van or a giant SUV or something like that. So the only thing with those car seats, they're not quite as safe, from an impact standpoint compared to the beefier seats. So you kind of got to make that trade-off if you want. But otherwise, obviously there's lots of, good, 3-row SUVs, minivans. So it just comes down to, what your favorite is in that bunch. I've reviewed all the minivans. I've reviewed probably every 3-row mainstream SUV at this point. So any models or whatever that come up, feel free to check out the reviews on them if that'd be helpful for you. I can say just general, like what my favorites are. Again, it comes down to individual preferences and your needs as far as do you need all-wheel drive and a zillion other things. But typically, Toyota Grand Highlander is just, in my opinion, one of the best ones as far as 3-row stuff goes. Mazda CX-90, again, another one of my favorites. So those would be the first 2 stops I would make if I'm going the SUV route and I needed, to have 3 people seated comfortably. If you want to really be crazy, again, what I would do if I was in that situation is go and lease. Well, I would have before this month leased an ID Buzz for dirt cheap and had a smile on my face constantly while driving it. Otherwise, though, if you're talking regular minivans, they're all really good in different ways. I actually don't think any of them are bad. Carnival, obviously, your wife likes that, and that's fantastic. Yeah, I think Pacifica also is very nice. I like that there's a plug-in hybrid version. Some people have had issues with them, but then there's other people that have had good luck with those. And the regular Pacificas seem pretty good, aside from electrical glitches, seem to be like the main thing. But the Pentastar V6 is a very known quantity. There's no surprises there. But otherwise, Sienna is great. Just gotta, again, pay a price premium. Honda Odyssey is great, a little dated, but still completely fine for just hauling kids around. If you want, sounds like, again, if you got the V8 and the Jeep, I mean, the other thing I would tell you probably that would more fit your vibe possibly would be a Durango. You can get a V8 Durango, and thankfully they've been around forever. So, if you can't go for a new one, you can go for an equivalent, 2019 Durango. I think that would probably be probably the best fit, again, based on what you've said so far there. So that's the great thing about Durangos. It is that, bring the whole family along muscle car, honestly, and so that's probably, sorry, it took me a roundabout way to get there, but that's probably my best recommendation for you based on what I know. There's things about Durango I don't like. Crash testing is not great. Other things, because it's just a dated old vehicle. Space utilization isn't the best these days. But if you don't need the maximum amount of cargo space, you just need enough seats for 3 car seats, and you want to have some fun with a V8 still, I think Durango is really going to be the only choice. You can go Explorer ST, that's the other one, but that you have to give up the V8 and go for the twin turbo V6. Still a lot of fun. I don't have a ton of confidence in that motor though, because even my neighbor had his turbos go on his Explorer ST. Could be an anecdotal thing, but I think with honestly the Hemi Durango, it's a safer bet as far as powertrain goes. But so that's hopefully it helps you a little bit there. Sorry, it's all over the place. Hopefully there's at least 1 or 2 helpful bits of info there for you, Ryan. And congrats again on the twins. It's very exciting. And Danny says, my driver's ed teacher sophomore year said driving is a privilege, not a right. Absolutely. And Wyatt says the Blue Jays are playing tonight, top of the 5th. Oh, okay. Sorry. I Googled what were the sports games happening tonight, and it told me about the Mariners versus the Angels, I think. And then I think Chiefs versus, I don't know, some other football team. So that's all I know about. But sorry, I missed the Blue Jays there. Well, then I hope they're doing well. And I'm rooting for them here. But B. Mitchell says what we call brass era cars from 1905 to 15 are having a renaissance, especially on the higher end examples. Search Stan Lucas auction on September 20th, and you'll see that they and the steamers he had did well. Interesting. Well, that's cool. I'm happy to see it. I would love to be a fly on the wall in one of those auctions and see, who's actually buying them. If they're not, phone buyers or online buyers, but if they're actually there bidding, I'd love to see who's fighting over the brass era stuff. That I don't know. I'm happy. I'm happy that there is appreciation there, but I did not expect that at all. Thanks for the info, B. Mitchell. And also, sorry, Ryan, and also Jonah for missing the super chats here. So Ryan also says, someone lend Matt a Mark IV Auto and a Super for a review. That'd be fun. I'd love a manual too and a turbo, obviously, but I'll take any Super, honestly. Even an Auto and a Mark IV, I would, be just loving driving that. That'd be awesome. And Jonah, thank you so much for super chat as well. He says, not sure if this was asked before, but what is your go-to book genre? What is your favorite author and book in that genre? I really love the old like crime detective murder mystery kind of stuff. Before it was like not the modern stuff. I like more of the like noir kind of old vintagey kind of stuff. So I said, I noticed your book collection behind you and was curious. So I have to say my favorite is the Walter Mosley. They call it the Easy Rollins is the detective. It's a really interesting take because it's, there's all the classics that I've enjoyed, or written in like the 1940s. So like legitimate, like, old school noir stuff like, Ray Chandler or Raymond Chandler and, those types of things that were made into Humphrey Bogart movies and stuff. Like all of those novels are very good. But the Walter Mosley stuff, he wrote the Easy Rollins series here, I believe in the 90s, but it starts in like the 40s. And now the newest book just came out a couple of weeks ago. I haven't read it yet, but it's now into the 70s. But it follows a black detective during those times. So it's a completely different perspective and really highlights, just the very different world that, that whole community had to navigate back then. And it's just, but it's also like a really good action thing. The first movie or the first book was actually made into a movie with Denzel Washington back in the 90s called Devil in a Blue Dress. But super good books, just like really good action, really good stories. And so that's what the, you can't see all of them over there, but that's what most of that lineup is, just all Walter Mosley stuff. He's a brilliant writer, and actually I think one of his other shows was turned into one of his other book series was turned into a TV show on FX called, I think, Snowfall. Haven't followed that because I've really just stuck with the crime thriller stuff that he did there, but so that's probably my favorites. But there's some other stuff too, of like some of the newer like James Bond stuff. There was Carte Blanche that was written, this is probably like 10 years ago at this point. That was pretty good. The Ian Fleming Bond novels, some of those have been enjoyable. I haven't read all of them, but some of the early ones, like I read Casino Royale, the actual book, that was great. And I'm trying to think, I have a bunch of other old ones I'm looking down here because I have a bunch of ones on my other shelf here, but all the Philip Marlowe book series as well. Just all those kinds of things are typically my favorite kind of books to read. And thanks for asking, Jenna. I appreciate it. And I got a bunch of DVDs also on this side that you might be seeing too. Those are just movies, but I got a lot of books. I should do another shelf tour for members. Actually, you're not a member there, but that was one thing I did as a member exclusive several years ago, and I've since added a bunch of stuff to the shelves. So I should probably do another little shelf walkthrough, maybe as a member exclusive here soon. Maybe you'll get a gifted membership here, Jonah, or something. You can check that out. But that was a fun little thing, and that's very easy to do. So I should do that here maybe this week. And let me see, Kyle, thank you so much for a very generous super chat, and happy to see you here, Kyle. Hope you're doing well. He says, my Ford dealer has 2 dark horses at 70,000. I actually saw a dark horse. I don't know if he knew who I was because he was weirdly revving next to me, and I was in a Corolla Cross hybrid. So I don't know what that was. I mean, I had a manufacturer plate, so if they were paying attention to all that stuff, I have no clue, but they were revving at me and like doing little mini flybys in a dark horse. It sounded really good. So I wasn't complaining, but I was very confused again because they didn't like wave or anything. But anyway, dark horse, yes, awesome cars. We say granted MSRP was still too pricey for this generation, but outside design, I still prefer the prior S550. And I mean, they have started to budge on S650 pricing as far as dealers go, at least. There's been a lot of discounts out there. I don't know about dark horses. If you're saying they're still 70, I can't remember what a loaded up dark horse actually MSRP'd for. I'm sure it was probably beyond that, especially if you got some of the higher end options. But I mean, it's still, to me, it's 70. It's just too hard to justify. I don't know what a GT500 goes for. It's been a while since I've checked, but it can't be that much more than that, if at all. Honestly, even a dark horse, I'd rather just have a GT350, Shelby GT350. If I'm because you can probably get a really nice one for 70 grand at that point. So I would go for something like that. Actually, a lot more special than dark horse, but dark horse is the last one standing there, and I'm happy that it's still around, even if it is kind of pricey. I mean, but yeah, regular GTs, I have seen some of those go for some real good deals. Like people are getting like 5+ grand off. And then they start to make a little more sense. If they're getting pretty close to the pricing of, the nice S550s, the Bullets, the Mach 1s, some of those later model year special things. If it's closing the gap with that, then it gets a little more appealing for S650, I think. And so I'm happy to see that, also now 2024s have been on the market for about 2 years or so, and so some of those have had some time to actually depreciate now. And so regular, S650 Mustangs are now coming down to reasonable pricing, and that's good to see. And thanks so much, Kyle, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. And Outside Center, thank you so much for a super chat as well. He says, do you think there is a new Charger prototype out there with a V8? I've heard rumors of that even before they announced, the whole renaissance with the Hemi and the Rams and stuff. There was rumors that there was one running around in Mexico with V8s or the V8 in it. And it's been a weird, circuitous path with that because, again, I've said this before. When I was on the Dodge Charger launch last December for Charger EV, we straight up, 3 feet away from the engineer, to his face, I asked, does the V8 fit? And he said no. And then I think Matt McAleer, who's the head of Dodge, then said it does fit. And then Tim Kuniskis is like, don't be surprised if these things fit, blah, blah, blah. So now they're like saying it does fit. So again, either they found a way to make it fit, which I'm guessing is the case, and maybe they didn't have that solution in December, or they just straight up didn't want to admit it. But I mean, he said like, no, it does not fit. That's what they told me. So I don't really know what to believe, but I'm inclined. I mean, there's just a mountain of talk, and usually when there's smoke, there's fire, so I'm inclined to think that yes, there is a V8 prototype. I think that a V8 is coming. I think just like you saw with Ram, it'll take a little bit of time to adapt because, again, that was not the original plan ever. But now, especially that we just heard that the Banshee got canceled, so the faster charging, higher horsepower electric Charger is not happening. And so there's only one way to go as far as if you want to have higher performing Chargers. Obviously no one's biting on the electric Scat Pack with it's already very fast, low 3 seconds or to 60 time and 670 horsepower. They got to go more than that. And so I think, you have to go for the V8. And as we saw with Ram, they're just going to go right back to recycling the same old stuff. And that's what people want because Dodge buyers have shown they don't want change. They don't want improvement. They just want the same old thing and make it as long as possible. And, they don't want change. So I think, Stellantis says, message received. Let's go back in time a few years and we'll just, pretend like we're stuck in, 2019 for as long as we possibly can and forget progress. And so I think that's what their customers want. And so they're in the business of staying in business. And if their buyers aren't willing to budge and evolve, then that's what they're stuck with. So I think, yes, there will be a V8 Charger because they have to if they want Charger to still be a thing because it's not going to cut it to keep it as it is. And as much as I'm open-minded and excited about the 6-cylinder, I don't think that's enough either because, again, it's different. And even though it's gas, that's not enough. It has to be a V8. I mean, again, we saw this with Ram. They have a fantastic Hurricane motor in it, but that wasn't good enough. It had to be a V8 that's slower and less efficient. So, okay, let's make everything slower and less efficient. And that's what they're going to do. The V8 version will definitely, unless there's a Hellcat one, and even that'll probably still be slower than the electric Scat Pack, but that's what people want. So, I think, yeah, it's going to happen and they'll find a way, even if they got to put a giant blower hood on it or something, they'll find a way to make it happen. But will that be enough? Because I think, okay, you finally cave, you give everyone what they want, the riots and the mob won. Now, where does that leave you and where does that take you? Are those people going to be happy? Are they going to go and buy a new V8 Charger? I don't know, because a lot of them also say, oh, the styling sucks and it got too heavy and it got too big and blah, 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 and have a bunch of other complaints as well, which is the thing about the internet is, everyone says, oh, I would have bought this if I had a V8. And then it's like when it actually comes time to put your money where your mouth is, all those people all of a sudden disappear. And, you know, and that's the tough thing is, you know, the few people who maybe were serious and do want to buy that, you know, you'll obviously have a few people, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to save Charger, because I think so many people have moved on. They're Mustang people now, because again, we've been at this for 2 years now, and I mean, they kind of just assumed the fate was sealed. And I think everyone, you know, or they said, "Oh, I got my old one and I'm happy and I'm gonna, you know, keep it pristine," or they again went and bought a Mustang, or they went and bought, you know, some other V8 thing instead, or they went to trucks or whatever. You know, there's all kinds of various ways I'm sure everyone split off. So I don't know, are those people going to return to, you know, a Dodge muscle car? You know, I don't know if they're going to ever sell as many as they did the Challenger, even if it is, again, you know, better in every other way. You know, some of that damage I think has been done, and those people are done with the brand, you know. But we'll see. You know, maybe they will be redeeming themselves and everyone will come back and finally be happy. But it seems like, you know, it's very hard to make those people happy. So I don't know. We'll see if that actually does it or not. And also, Outside Center, thank you for another super chat. He says, "Are you saying the Charger was popular because it openly marketed themselves to degenerates? The degeneracy gave it a unique niche in the car market." I mean, I wouldn't label it degenerates. I mean, I enjoyed them. They're some of my most popular videos. It's fun. You know, I just think that I was embracing progress, and the EV version did what Charger owners do better, which is drag race and beat people from a red light. What is the fastest thing in a red light? The Tesla Model 3 Performance that no one suspects that's next to you and blows the doors off of everything else without even trying. You know, so I think, like I've said before, you know, Dodge, their whole reasoning for the electric one was performance made us do it. And it held up. It makes sense. And I still, even if they don't believe in their own marketing anymore, I do. Like, that is the right path forward. If you want to make the best drag car, electric is the way to do the best drag car. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It hooks up perfectly every time. You have all weather traction, and you have instant 100% torque from 0 RPM and 0 mile per hour. That is the drag car perfected. Now, obviously, yes, from a fun standpoint, from subjective sound, blah, 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 obviously all that is off the table. But if you know, Dodge people truly were sick of losing to the Mustangs and the Camaros, and they wanted to be the best at the drag strip, the Charger EV is the best way to be the best at the drag strip. Like, there's no debate. Like, if you're worried about winning, it's the best thing. You know, so I think that's, like I've said already before, like, there's so many people that, you know, were so obsessed with winning and so obsessed with being the fastest thing out there. And then whenever they were given a faster thing, then they're like, "Oh, well, no, it's not the right way. I'm fine. Now I just want to have my slow V8, and I don't care that I'm losing races. I don't care that I'm, you know, being embarrassed by, you know, a family, you know, mom and her Tesla or whatever, like, because it's about the experience now." And they've turned into these purists that don't care about going fast supposedly anymore. But like, you know, so to me, the you know, the Charger just you know, but it did market to being this rebellious kind of thing. But also, I mean, Ford does it, you know, Chevy did it. I mean, that's kind of just goes with the muscle car vibe. It's always been that way. The muscle car is the bad boy kind of vehicle, you know. So I mean, it's on brand. It's just, you know, again, I think Dodge just got the wrong idea. They thought that people actually wanted to win races and go fast, and really, they just wanted to, you know, act like they were actually the fastest, but they really just are in it for the experience and the sound and the, like, you know, peacocking around, and not so much the actual winning races, I think. And that was their bad for reading that audience wrong. And you know, but that's the only way to beat the Teslas, is to go electric. You're not going to beat a Tesla with a Hellcat. Like, it's going to lose every single time. But, you know, again, the Dodge fans have spoken, and they want to lose to Teslas. So they're going to lose to Teslas, and anything else. Our 500 horsepower Lyric will smoke a, you know, Scat Pack any day of the week. It's just, you know, it's very easy to do with instant full power and perfect traction. So, you know, it is what it is. But I was excited about the progress, and being like, hey, this is going faster. It's fun. I took a Charger EV down a drag strip. It's perfect. It you know, again, it's all about this. I'm about progress, especially as a reviewer. Like, I'm looking for a car to be better than the last one. If I want to give it a good review and say, hey, they did a good job on this new generation of a vehicle, it has to be better than the last. And when we're talking about performance vehicles, that means faster. And we're going to be slower. I'm going to be reviewing a V8 Charger, I'm sure, at some point down the road, and it will be slower than the electric one. To me, that means it is worse from its objective goal of being a fast performance car. Obviously, again, it'll win points for the sound and for the experience and the old school vibe, and all of that again has merit. I'm not discounting that, and everyone likes something different. I fully respect that. If that's your thing, is you like the experience. I mean, I like that as well. Manuals are slower. This has been the same thing with the manual versus auto debate for a long time. Manuals are slower. I don't care. I just enjoy that experience. So I fully understand people that say it's about the experience, but then, again, don't pretend like you're the fastest car on the road. Like, I never thought the Bullet was fast. I know it's not really that fast because I'm not a pro driver. I'm not money shifting that thing and, going ham with, jamming it into gear. Like, I take my time on shifts and take it easy and stuff. And, it's just, it was about the fun and the engagement. But, yeah, anyway, that's my little rant there, which I'm sure I've given many times before. So I apologize to anyone who's heard it again, but yeah, that's just how they've played it. And with the Rams, the truck stuff, yeah, you got to go a little more redneck with your marketing there because, let's face it, that's the buying base that Ram has. And that's kind of the appeal. And obviously, again, that goes for any of the truck brands in some ways, but especially I think Ram really leans into that. And that's been a very good thing for their business. And again, it's about the dollar signs, and they're a business, they're there to make money. And so if the best way to make money is to appeal to that crowd and lean into it, especially while you can get away with it without getting fines, again, enjoy the party while it lasts. And I think that's what they're doing. It's short-sighted, I think, is the bottom line with all of this stuff, whether it's getting rid of the electric, stuff that's in the pipeline, going into the V8s heavy-handed, like, I mean, maybe Dodge thinks this won't end in 2029, or maybe they think that, this will be the way things are going to be forever. But I think most car companies understand this is not going to be the case forever. We will have rules again someday. We will have regulations. And where is everyone going to be positioned whenever that happens? And Stellantis is very much putting themselves in a dangerous position. They're going to do great. They're going to rake in cash. You're going to see record profits until 2029. And then maybe beyond that, again, depending on how, political stuff, changes or doesn't change. But, I don't think it's going to last forever. And that's everyone's going to play it differently. Like we've seen the past 5 years, everyone's played everything differently. Some companies went too heavy into the EVs and then got in trouble with that. Toyota, I think, played it perfectly with, having a mix of everything. And they've kind of really been wise about how they've played this. And I think they're very well positioned to kind of take a more, methodical approach to this and not, completely switch everything over to electric. And having something for everyone, I think, is the smart way to do it. I think, and you're seeing more and more companies kind of follow what Toyota did. And I think that's because they've seen Toyota is having record profits and they're still progressing, and you don't have to have those things be mutually exclusive. You can go all hybrid for Camry and all hybrid for RAV4 and drastically reduce your emissions and still give people options and not piss everybody off. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are mad about a hybrid, but paths of least resistance. And I think, it's just going to be interesting to see how everyone kind of plays again the next 5 years and see, who ends up being in trouble once 2030 comes. But I'm nervous for Stellantis long term as a result of that. I mean, again, the European stuff's kind of separate, but as far as the American brands, it's very hard because you can't plan a product cycle around an administration because it just takes too long typically to, really bring in something fully engineered. This is why the new Ram V8 is the old Ram V8, essentially, with the new electrical system. That's the only change they had to make, but the engine is identical. And they said because that was the faster way to certify things and get things in the market there. So it's, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that I think, can be done quickly, but it comes with concessions. And, that's one of the concessions is like the Ram is still just using the old e-torque thing. I think a lot of people would probably love it not having e-torque. And I think Ram knows that. They'd probably ditch the e-torque if they could, because they don't need that anymore, for the next few years here either. But again, that was the fastest path forward. But I think you'll see the e-torque thing even drop off, as soon as they can, because again, who gives a crap about emissions for the next few years? And so, do whatever you want is the message that's been sent, So anyway, moving on here. And thank you so much for the super chats. Kyle, thank you so much for gifting memberships too. I really appreciate the generosity, and happy to see a bunch of new faces they're able to get, including Jonah got one. That's awesome. So yeah, I'll show you the all the books there, Jonah, in a shelf tour here for a member exclusive video soon. So I'm happy that Jonah was able to get one. Thanks so much, Kyle, for the generosity. And Raphael, thank you so much for a super chat. He says, "We're not difficult to make happy. Give me the car with the best sound and then take my money." Yeah, I agree, but I think, again, it's just the goodwill that kind of gets damaged. And there's a lot of people that were very upset about the switch from Dodge. Maybe they'll all forgive and they'll all run out and buy a V8 one. Yeah, I'm sure Dodge would love that, and I'm sure that's what they're hoping for. But yeah, we'll just have to see if it does what those buyers actually want. But yeah, I mean, sound is obviously very important. I think they were starting to crack that code. I think some people don't love the new Charger EV. I thought it actually sounded pretty cool, and it was really fun to have the windows down. I mean, I was sitting in traffic in Phoenix, just idling there in an electric car. It was fun. I like it. I'm still waiting to get one to do a review on for a week, because I've only still just done the first drive. They've been very slow with sending them to our press fleet here, unfortunately. But I liked it. I mean, Ioniq 5N, I have all the fun sounds, and I still have, the electric propulsion. And that's one of the reasons why I love Ioniq 5N so much. It's, I can have the crackles and the pops in my own world, in my own little car here, and not be, waking up the neighborhood. And so it's kind of having your cake and eating it too, especially as someone who, again, is trying to not, make enemies in the neighborhood and stuff. It's nice to have something that's, nice and quiet, but you can still have fun. I think, again, that's why yes, it's not exactly the same, but to me, it was very little compromise, because they understood that people wanted the sound and they were working to make that. And obviously, the first generation of anything is not going to be fantastic, as far as the sound and figuring out, how to do things. Although I think I could argue that Hyundai kind of nailed it from the very first get-go with Ioniq 5N. But, there's always room for improvement and adding more sounds. And, that's been kind of the whole discussion before everyone gave up on EVs here in America for the next few years, is the idea of, having your whole library, have Porsche say, hey, for Taycans, you can download and have it sound like a GT3 RS. You can have it sound like, a 1980s 911. The possibilities are limitless. And yes, it's not real and you're not smelling gasoline and everything else, but you could still have that sound component, and again, for a lot of people, though, that's not enough. It needs to be real. And I can understand that. But, I think that was the bottom line. I think that was something that was going to get better if we stuck the course. I think, again, the rest of the world will still continue to do that and still improve. And maybe we'll get some of that, trickling down to us, but I'm frustrated that Dodge kind of gave up on all that stuff, because I think they could have really done a great job and, again, been the front runner to be positioned to be the best position for the future, with Ford dragging their feet and saying they're not going to do an electric Mustang. And obviously, if Chevy does do some kind of new Camaro, it might be electric, but it'll probably be 4 doors or an SUV, and weird in other ways. But so I mean, I'm just really sad, because I was so excited for the future of Dodge, and but again, it wasn't selling. So, there's the free market to blame for some of that stuff as well. But anyway, I see Raphael says, I'm always totally honest. I don't care at all about speed. I want the car to look and sound good. And there's a lot of enthusiasts that are like that too. I'm right there with you. It's about the fun, and that's why, I could have had a faster car, but the Bullet was perfect for me. It had the sound, it had the look and the comfort, and had the manual, and yeah, I never cared about, winning races or, being fast in the Bullet. It was just about, enjoying the experience. So I'm right there with you. I can completely relate to that. So I'm mostly talking about, the real, again, racer kind of crowd, and those people more so than just the casual going out for an afternoon drive kind of thing on the weekends. I think that's a different kind of buyer. And a different kind of mentality than, the people that are actually, street racing everyone they see and, going to this drag strip all the time and stuff like that. But let me see. I see Ryan says very good fleshed out take on the about face and general fickleness and unpleasability of the Charger and Challenger buyers. I'm glad you appreciate it. Hopefully I haven't annoyed too many people here with this very long tangent. I apologize. We'll get back to concise answers here. Yeah, I'm glad at least one or two of you enjoyed the little tangent here. But anyway, back to our discussions here earlier. So let me see, where were we here? So Darnell says GTIs have a great interior, great power, and good handling for the price. Brakes are also amazing with the performance pack spec. Yeah, GTIs are great all-arounders. I totally agree. And German Engineering says, hey, I was wondering if you've owned any German performance cars other than the RS3. I highly recommend anything with the B58 engine. It's a great way to go as well if you want a solid platform. I agree. B58, I love that motor. Talking about good sounding motors and a boatload of power. I love B58. I've never owned anything other than the R56 Mini Cooper S, which wrong generation to buy. I know. This was again back in 2014, 2013, 2014 when I had the R56, and I love that car though. Even though it was unreliable, it left me stranded. It was. When it was working, I really loved that thing, and I still miss it. But yeah, that was the only German vehicle I've ever actually owned myself. Now, Beth has leased 2 C classes here, so she had a 2016 and then a 2019, and then that we got rid of that for the Mach-E back in 2022. But she had those 2. They were a little glitchy. She really liked the Mercedes brand, and they were nice cars. Especially, we spec'd out her 2019 because that was back when the channel was doing really well. So she literally just went through the options list and just did whatever. And she also was that was before we had our kids, so she was working and helping to contribute to that as well. But she kind of was wishing that she had done more with her 2016 or gotten a more exciting spec, because it was just a former loaner that she leased for that one. But with the 2019, we actually factory ordered it, and she got the emerald green, she got the beautiful tan leather, just really a beautiful spec. Even when we were turning in the lease, the dealer was like, are you sure you don't want to buy this lease out there? This is the nicest C class we've gotten in. They're like, I can't believe you want to give up this car. And we're just like, you guys don't have anything for us. We want to, we needed something a little bit more spacious, because we had a kid at that point. But she loved that C class. She was sad to see that go. But, personally, if it was me, making the decisions on that stuff, I don't know if I'd go German myself. Honestly, I really like Genesis and some of the other more value-oriented luxury brands. But BMW does great stuff. And as far as the 3 Germans goes, I think for me, it depends on the segment we're talking about. But I think BMW and Audi are both, in my opinion, better than Mercedes in most cases, at least as far as what I prefer. But the B58 is always, anything that's in that has the B58 is fantastic. That's one of the reasons why I love Mark V Supra, because B58 is just glorious, and especially in that little short wheelbase, it's an absolute ride of a car. But yeah, I love B58, and glad you're enjoying them. And yeah, I agree. It seems like it's a really solid motor too, from a reliability standpoint. So that kind of stuff, the only thing I ever worry about is, electrical gremlins, and expensive maintenances and things like that. But other than that, yeah, great cars for sure. The E-Train says, I've been a car enthusiast for all my life, but have had limited time with manuals. It's tough, but I don't feel confident to buy a new car with a manual at this experience level. With how much cars are and how little exposure people are getting to manuals, it makes sense they keep selling less and less here. Yeah, I think we've kind of found a bottom for manual demand, because it's, in the past couple of years, I don't know for this past year, I don't know if I've seen data for that, but in the 2020s here, we've seen manuals kind of level out and start to slowly climb a little bit, especially used manual sales, and also just, again, collector car market and the high end stuff. This is why we're seeing, more and more manuals in that whole, we're seeing more from Porsche and stuff like that, because there are, people that are, I guess, either reconnecting with manuals or appreciating manuals more. But especially sounds like a lot of Gen Zers and like new drivers are really excited about manuals, and parents are very excited about them as well. Because when you're shifting, you don't really have the ability to be, playing on your phone. And so it seems like, but I think a lot of just Gen Zers seem like they really are craving that kind of connection and kind of the sentimentality of the old school experience of a manual. And so that gives me some hope that there will be maybe even a little bit more manual demand in the future. And it is something that I think will hopefully, at least stay strong as long as they can until we go, to everything being electrified, which again, now we have a few more years of that here, before we have to, have probably some progress on that again. But I'm hoping, we do see more manual hybrids. There's talk that, even like the GR86, the next generation that's going to be shared with Miata, supposedly now, according to the rumor, that could be hybridized, and I'm assuming still offer a manual, because I don't think Toyota would do it with just automatics. Maybe they would, I don't know. But so I'm hoping that we can get some progress, but keep the manual as well. That'd be great. So we'll have to see. But as far as your position there in particular, if you want a manual, I will say that it's one of those things that's kind of like riding a bike. Once you get the hang of it, it's something where you truly, to get good at driving a manual, you really do have to do it every day. And even, I've found myself being a little sloppy in the first day or two of, I get a manual press car. It's the first manual I've driven in 6 months or something. Obviously, again, you always know how to do it, because once you get the hang of it, again, it's like riding a bike, but like you're still just a little less smooth. But it's not too hard, especially modern manuals. The clutches are pretty light. They're pretty forgiving. A lot of these cars have auto rev match downshifts. So you don't even have to worry about that. It's just worrying about the upshifts. And, once you get the coordination of just, clutch in, foot off gas, back, forth, back, forth. Once you get that, seesaw, embedded into your brain, then, I mean, it's really not hard. And, there's also, by the way, there are manual driving schools. It's been something that's been more and more popular recently, where you can actually, I mean, you'd have to be in an area where someone offers that, but, you can pay someone to teach you how to drive a manual. Or, if you have the money to spend, try and find the crappiest manual car on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, just something that runs and drives with a manual, as cheap as you possibly can. Beat up on it. You don't feel bad about, screwing it up or whatever. And then, as long as it's a pretty cheap car, you can flip it and still probably get most of your money back. Or, at the worst, you're, maybe blowing a few $100 just to get your experience there. And then you go and, get the car you actually want. But I know a lot of people that say, hey, I really wanted a manual. I didn't know how to drive it. My first time driving a manual was driving off the lot, and it can be painful, especially in a really nice, newer car. I did it myself, though, even though I had experience driving manual, but not a ton of experience. I just would drive stuff around the car lot, and kind of got a basic understanding. But my first car that I bought myself, the Legacy GT, was a manual, and the very first, I signed the paperwork. And then, I was able to drive on level ground just fine. But I was still struggling with rolling back on hills. And my one buddy was like, look, like, you're going to be out in traffic. Like, you can't be rolling back on hills. This was before the hill holder stuff, really. And this was back in the weird gap when Subaru didn't have hill holder clutches, because they had them in the past, but Legacy GT didn't have it. So I'd roll back, and he's like, look, like, it's going to be painful, but like, we're going to a hill, or there's no one around, and you got to nail this and like figure this out. And I'm like, you're right. And, I was smelling some clutch, and again, my car I just, bought, and was, really just such a nice car, because it was a 15,000 mile Legacy GT Spec B. But I took it and, was struggling and starting on hills, but I had to learn it, and I did it. And then, after a couple of days, I was fine. And, it's been now, how long has it been? I guess, because it was like 15 when I learned. So at this point, it's been 20 years of driving manual, and it's still my favorite way to drive a car. So don't be discouraged. Is like in the long-winded answer there. But I'd try and go for it if you really want to. And B. Mitchell says, show and display allows 2,500 miles. Talking about our earlier discussion. Thank you for that. So that's it's a lot more than I thought. So that's pretty cool. And B. Mitchell said, there's a McLaren Speedtail that's been auction bait for about a year, as it's been racking up too many miles. Oh, interesting. Yeah, the Speedtails is kind of interesting. I don't know. Do people still? Obviously, there's people that still want them, but I kind of wonder if McLaren reached the limit of who bought that kind of stuff and whether they're still, worth big money or not. But yeah, because that's the Speedtail's the one, right, where it was like they had the central driving position, but they couldn't federalize it here because of the like side impact laws and stuff, I believe. But yeah, interesting. And Neil says, "Hey Matt, how was your weekend, man? Do you get out and do anything exciting? Love catching these live streams before a crazy work week." Well, thanks so much, Neil, for stopping by, and thanks for the comment. If you're still here, hopefully you've hung around. I apologize again for the long delay on answers here. But yeah, weekends are always just doing fun family stuff. So we did some family pictures here. We always do in the fall, and that was fun. Celebrated some birthdays this weekend with some others who had their birthdays here recently, and just kind of doing fun, fall stuff, family kind of stuff. With having a 4-year-old, it's all about everything's geared towards them right now. So just doing that kind of fun stuff. We went to an amusement park yesterday called Idlewild, which is a fun thing to do in the fall. You can do kind of trick-or-treating stuff around the park and everything. So that's the kind of stuff. I don't really do any car stuff. I haven't been to Cars and Coffee in a couple of years. I'd love to do stuff, but thankfully this job is allowing me to scratch the car itch and try out new cars and see cool cars and all that. So that's kind of the way I'm doing it for now. I know one day I will be able to get back into the car world and the culture and all that, but for now it's just all about 100% focus on my daughter while she's small, and while she doesn't have a zillion other people she needs to hang out with. I'm just cherishing the time that I have with her here before she spreads her wings and goes out and does other things here. So just enjoying all that while I can. And Darnell says a lot of the insurance premium is repair costs for similar cars and percentage of cars with similar VINs with claims. Right. Yeah, that's true. Talking about the discussion earlier about what influences insurance rates. He says some cars can have a fender painted and repair for $750. Other cars is $3,000. Absolutely. And that's really I think why we're seeing a lot of the rise in insurance rates here in the past few years is all the electronics jammed into the front end of these cars, all the sensors. It used to be a 5 mile per hour fender bender. You just buff it out, you adjust the bumper, maybe do a little bit of paint, and you're probably fine. Now that's a multi-$1,000 impact, and it's a big whole ordeal, and recalibrate stuff. It's a whole thing. I mean, usually those systems prevent a lot of those kind of accidents from happening now, but there is, just if those things do get bashed in, it's just way more of a bigger deal than smashing a fog light or something than it used to be, for sure. And so with, most stuff from like 2017 and on, having automatic emergency braking is standard and stuff, all of those cars, which is a lot of most people probably have a 2017 or newer at this point. It's everyone's going to have these higher insurance rates as a result of that. So yeah, great point there, Darnell. And Maran says, hi Matt, I'm getting closer to having my Durango. I'm also mad about the new Hellcat jailbreak getting banned in the 17 states. I also think I have a big obsession with Hellcats. They don't leave my head. That's awesome. I'm glad you found something you love. And yeah, it's interesting how they weren't able to, get that. I think it's just the CARB certification for whatever reason. I mean, that could end up going away because, again, that's all being fought out in court as far as whether California can continue to do, the thing they've done for decades now, or whether they're not going to be able to do that for the time being. We'll see. But yeah, because like PA is one of those states. So like, even if I had the opportunity to review a V8 Hellcat, it's like, or a Durango Hellcat or something like that. It's like, is there, you're going to have less of a market, and I'm sure most people that have them already or want them already have them anyway for the most part. So but yeah, you might see more of that too. We'll see how things play out, but I think you're going to see car companies have to get a little more selective about the stuff that they sell sometimes. But Raphael says, I love the Amira and I was surprised I fit. I'm 6 foot and 225 pounds. That's awesome. I'm glad that you fit and that it's hopefully a little bit better with the comfort stuff than prior Lotuses there. And that's great. And Lancelot says, my dad had a 66 Ford Thunderbird with the 390 FE when I was a kid. That's awesome. All my friends wanted the engine out of it as soon as we discovered cars. I bet. Yeah, that 390, great motor. That's what's in the original movie Mustang Bullet. had the 390 in it, and beast of a motor for a little Mustang too. I'm sure I've heard all kinds of anecdotal stories about how crazy that motor is to drive in a Mustang. So that's sure. And if Thunderbird is a little more even keel, but still probably pretty wild. So your dad sounds like he was pretty cool. And Darnell says if someone lends Matt a Mark IV, it's got to have the turbos in the wing. I would hope so. But again, beggars can't be choosers. And Luke says even make Mazda 3 an Integra competitor with a Sportback. That's a good point too. Absolutely, for a new Mazda 3. They should absolutely do that. I mean, I was actually talking to a Mazda dealer recently, and I asked him, like, what do you think is going to happen with the Mazda 3? He's like, I think they're just going to get rid of it. And, we see this with a lot of other companies, going all SUV, Lincoln is one of the more recent examples, and, some others. And, because I'm like, I really hope they get some kind of big sedan or something. He's like, I just think they're not going to bother with competing with sedans. And I mean, that's an entirely plausible option as well, but I would sure hope that they do want to compete with Integra, because Integra, I mean, that came onto the scene and did, get a huge chunk of the market share for the premium entry-level segment. And I'm sure other car companies have to be a little bit jealous of that. So, yeah, I think all Mazda 3 needs, honestly, is a bigger backseat and a bigger trunk. To be like, honestly, that would fix a lot of its problems and I think help sell a lot more cars. But absolutely, the Sportback would be a nice perk too. And Raphael says, I was 19 when I got my Celica GTS, then 23 when I got my Celica Supra. I love them both. That's awesome. I'm glad you got to experience both and have a good long time, hopefully, in both of them. That's really cool. And yeah, I'm jealous you got to experience this. It must have been awesome. And Lantern Tail says, have you heard about the Tesla Model Y and 3 Standard? Really expensive and so many features cut. Seems like they're following Apple's pricing structure. Model 3 Standard starts at 36. Model Y starts at 39. Yeah. To me, again, I know a lot of people really like the way they do things with, whether it's the infotainment or just the way the cars drive or whatever. I personally, I don't see the appeal. It's just, especially those standard ones. Yeah. Like, the crazy thing, I talked about this in the Wednesday live stream, they apparently, which I don't know how they got to this math, but it was cheaper to cover the glass roof in those cars with a headliner than to develop a metal roof. But I'm like, why not just leave the glass in then? Because surely that's cheaper than covering it up and trying to penalize people for not going for one of the more expensive ones. If it's in there, that's even more infuriating than like charging a subscription for heated seats, because like, at least with that, like they allow you to get the thing, even if you have to pay for the thing, they at least give you the option. And I mean, it sounds like that's kind of been tabled, all those kinds of ideas anyway. But even if that were a thing, you have heated seats and you can't access them without paying for it, at least that's one thing. But like to have to literally pull down your headliner and try and find a way to tear it out so you have your glass roof that's there, like that's like your car company is actually trying to like, give a punch in the eye to your buyers of your base models. If you're actively like making it worse and you're spending money to make it worse and less nice because they didn't spend more money. Just truly wild stuff. I mean, there's other car companies that do dumb things, but not quite that dumb in my opinion. That's just like really that takes some effort to be that insane. So yeah, I'm to me, it's not a good deal. Again, if you want a good entry-level electric vehicle, and you have to buy new, I'd say, this new Nissan Leaf sounds fantastic. I'm going to be reviewing one, I think around Thanksgiving time. I'll finally have one as a press vehicle. But I mean, they priced it so well. But I mean, Equinox EV, if you don't need CarPlay, Equinox EV, 35, 37 grand, same thing. I would absolutely rather have Equinox EV. I mean, Model 3 is going to be faster and it's going to, be a better car dynamically, I'd say as well. But does that entry-level buyer care? No. What is going to be the better thing for them? A regular familiar thing that, has a regular SUV kind of shape that, is available with either front-wheel drive, which you can't get in the Teslas, by the way, or all-wheel drive, and I think that familiarity is important to a lot of people, especially people who, kind of go cheap, but they live in a snow belt and they, can handle front-wheel drive. I think Equinox EV was very smart about how they did all that. And so Yeah, like even without CarPlay, I mean, because you don't get it in Tesla either. So if that's all being equal, like why not just go for that? Or like I said many times before, like why anyone who's buying a base model Tesla in particular, why would you not buy like a 1 year old used one and get all those features? And I mean, because the values just plummet. So any real value buyer is not buying new. They're always going to buy used. And especially with EVs, with how fast they plummet, any of these things, again, if you're, oh, I got 36 grand to spend, go buy our old Mach-E with 20,000 miles sold for like 28,000, or that's what it was listed at, 28 grand for a, 3-year-old 20,000 mile Mach-E with a big glass roof with, all the stuff you could want, all-wheel drive, very nice leather, heated seats, heated steering wheel. I mean, everything you can think of pretty much. 28 grand. And I mean, that's, everything, every single electric vehicle that's used pretty much is under $30,000, for the, at least the mainstream stuff, and so why would, if you're actually strapped for money, why are you buying new? Just, if you lease or something and there's a lease deal, okay, maybe, but like, again, all that stuff's kind of evaporated with the tax credit going away. So I don't even think there's an angle there. So I really don't know how Tesla is rationalizing this or thinking this is a good business proposition. But especially the thing is, they said, oh, an entry level Tesla's coming, blah, blah, blah. And then it's just the same 3 and Y. And I really think the lack of new product is really a huge, a huge issue. That, we're talking about the Apple model structure there with pricing. The difference is Apple is smart enough to change the look of stuff, even if it's slightly, they change it up every year, or you could argue every 2 years sometimes if it's kind of a S year, even though they don't do the S stuff anymore. But like they understand, like, we need to offer new colors, we need to offer new things, and like you can't just have the same thing forever, especially in the car world, because no one knows you got the new one unless it's got the new styling. And there's a lot of people that really, they're spending a lot of money. They want everyone to know, hey, look, I have a nice car and I have something new, and not one of the zillions of Teslas that all look the same and who knows what model year they are. It's important to have that styling progression, and Tesla just doesn't seem interested in competing in that traditional car buying way, and everyone's still in that mindset. And again, they have fantastic sales, so they're doing things to the beat of their own drum, and kudos to them. But I think we're seeing the limit of that. Their sales are doing terrible. Obviously Elon doesn't help that, but I think it's also stale product. I think if they had fantastic fresh product, I mean, look at all the people that have had to leave the fan base because they're tired of their Model S or their Model X, and they want to graduate to something. What do you graduate to? You go to a Lucid. That's the next generation Tesla that Tesla's not doing. It's next generation efficiency that gives you a new look. It's that's what everyone's doing, is they're just going and getting a Lucid, or they're getting a Rivian if they are wanting something a little more rugged, coming out of a Model X or something. Those people have all moved on. And I mean, you look on the forums, I mean, I've seen so many Facebook groups and people being like, I used to have a Tesla and now I'm in a Rivian, or now I'm in a Lucid, or now I'm in a Cadillac. I mean, a lot of Lyric owners are former Tesla people. Polestar, I mean, take your pick. Any of these brands, they've all capitalized on Tesla standing still. And that's the good old competitive free market doing its thing, and that's working as it should. You're not going to compete, other people will. And Tesla had the luxury of being the only game in town for a while, and now everyone's caught up, and they've caught up with very good products. It used to be these little appliance cars and compromised little things, and that's not the case anymore. So it's going to be sink or swim for Tesla, and it's crazy how the stock price is so completely detached from reality and what the actual company is worth and doing, and their future prospects just doesn't look good. But it's still hard to say, because again, the stock market's completely irrational. But anyway, let me see. Mr. 705 says, from what I know, with still having friends that work at the Honda factory in Ontario, they are working overtime 4 days a week and have production Saturdays. They can't build them fast enough for the CRV. That's great. Well, I'm glad it's doing well. So, I mean, yeah, that's the important component, is if the money's, there and people are buying, then yeah, there's no reason to reduce price on CRV, regardless of what people like me say, or even if it does get reviews that complain about that. If the reality is they can't build them fast enough, then yeah, absolutely, Honda's playing it right. Maximize your profits until you find that limit. Keep on inching it up. Juice the margin and see where people stop. But it's interesting. Thanks for the insight on that, Mr. 705. And Elijah said, do you think a nuclear powered vehicle, much like submarines, would be a viable idea? I don't think so. You look at how people already complain about hydrogen cars being like, oh, it's a giant, Hindenburg every time you drive around, even though it's not. And they have obviously engineered for that stuff. But like, you already have that misconception with hydrogen. I mean, nuclear, it's the same thing as like autonomous cars. People are terrified of them. And rightly so, I'd say, but same thing with the nuclear thing. Anything that's new, it's unknown. It's, especially if you're talking about it in a new thing, like, having it in a car. People don't like change. They don't want to have to figure something out that's different, and unfamiliarity is scary. And especially when talking about nuclear, I mean, that is about one of the scariest words you can think of, obviously, for good historical reasons. And so, I don't think that's viable. Even if we had some kind of really awesome little mini nuclear reactor or something, I don't think, just because even the waste standpoint, because you have to handle that stuff obviously very carefully and appropriately and stuff. It just, I don't see that, especially, if we had no other good solutions going forward, if electricity wasn't a thing, if hydrogen wasn't a thing. I think even hydrogen's a better idea. I think if those things didn't exist, maybe that'd be something that people would. I mean, Chrysler played around with it. They had, those little things, like there's the turbine car, but I think there was also someone was dabbling with nuclear, and just, I think just something that wouldn't ever make sense commercially. But to me, that's just probably not going to ever happen. And again, I also, from a efficiency standpoint, nuclear is fantastic at generating electricity. It just makes sense. Instead of having to transport a radioactive material to fuel your car, it's easier to just have that nuclear provide your electricity, have that go straight into the car, and be very efficient and with the transport of that. And that's the whole big perk of electric over gas, is you don't have to physically move the fuel. It's all just in the grid there. And I think that's why every industry, car wise, is all agreeing like, hey, like electric just makes sense. Even if you power it, however you want to power it and get that electricity, it's just like, this seems to be the best way to do cars. If you're talking about appliances that just get people from point A to point B, it's pretty perfect in a lot of ways. And once again, the other things come in line, like the infrastructure and stuff, it'll be even better. But that was just, again, part of the development that we're going to still see in the rest of the world. It's a great question, though, Elijah. Thanks for asking. And Lee's Restoration Stations has, I've noticed old 1990s versus new truck reviews that do well. Do you think a 1950s versus new truck video would do well? Possibly. I mean, I think that'd be kind of fun, just to see the progression. And I think that's kind of, I'm guessing, the fun of like 90s to now is, the progression and how things have changed. So that would be really, a fun idea. Obviously very hard to kind of do that stuff and source those kinds of vehicles. So that's the challenge. But you have to also be the right channel for it. I've tried classic car reviews on this channel. They never really did super well. A couple of them have been okay. But like, I did a 1957 Ford Ranchero and no one watched it. And, I mean, again, it is a different viewer, and it's not the fan base that I've really cultivated, is people that are appreciating 50s cruisers. But, so if you're a channel like Haggard, you could probably do something like that and probably get really good views. But, just something that I probably wouldn't be able to do very well. But I hope someone does it. That'd be cool. Let me see. Amari says, is there anything about an SRT Durango I should be aware of? I'm not going to be the best source of info for that. If you go to subreddits, forums, Facebook groups, things like that are going to be where you're going to get the best info on all of the issues potentially for, those. And even YouTube, there's probably a lot of stupid clickbait too, but you might get some actual good info as well as far as issues with them there too. Personally, I haven't heard of. I know in the early days of the Hellcats, I believe some people were having to have the superchargers replaced, but I think that was kind of an early teething issue. I don't recall anything else with Hellcats. Mechanically, they seem to be okay. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know of anything else. It's honestly just, I think the biggest thing is, just the theft rates. Making sure that it's really secure, because they are just I think the number one targeted vehicle for car thieves. So that's really going to be the thing. It's just making sure that you can, securely store it, ideally in a garage, or at least just, again, make sure your key, whenever you get it, is in a Faraday, a little cage thing that, blocks the transmitter signal, so that you can't, because that's the popular thing, is they, roll up to your house, they, put up their extender for their antennas or whatever, and then that, allows the car to see the key and then allow it to start up, and they just drive away like they own the thing, and it's very common. So just make sure you can secure one. I think that'd be the main thing I'd be concerned about, more so than reliability stuff. But yeah, that's about it. And Lantern Tail says a good video suggestion would be the history of car models, discussing their developments and other automotive history. I agree that those kinds of videos are really fun. Very research intensive, though. If you actually want to know what you're talking about and do that well, it's usually a lot of really digging into the research, because I made the mistake early on with some of the Car Buzz articles I wrote of doing stuff that was a little more in depth with the research, and it takes a lot of time. And really, the name of the game with YouTube is churning out stuff as fast as you can. And so, for that reason, it's not something that I would be doing, because it's just, I don't have the time to devote to something like that to do it well. But that's, something that a lot of people have had good success with. I've seen some of that kind of stuff out there on YouTube, and really fascinating. I know also, like, even the regular car reviews, like, he's done some pretty good histories on stuff in the past, and going into, all kinds of interesting topics. So that's, there's some people, again, have that luxury of time. Unfortunately, just, it's something I am way stretched thin on. Like, if I were to do one of those kinds of videos, I'd have to not have a car review at all, instead of having 2 or 3 car reviews. That way, it could just be like, that would be the only video I'd be able to do that week, which, I mean, might work out. If that gets way more views, it might be better than, quality over quantity kind of thing. But yeah, just be a leap of faith. Especially, again, if your channel is known for the history stuff, it could probably do a lot better versus, again, mine, where people are just coming for car buying advice or some, engine entertainment and stuff like that. Might be a little bit tougher, but I love car history, though. So that'd be something, be fun to do, but I'd probably pick boring topics anyway, and probably wouldn't be the best channel to do it here. But I do sprinkle a little bit of car history into the junkyard walks, and fun little anecdotes or factoids that maybe people haven't heard in a while or didn't know. So that's going to kind of be the vehicle for some of that stuff a little bit, and I may do a little bit more deep dive if, again, that channel really takes off. Then maybe I do a little bit less on this channel, and maybe do, some more deep dives on some of these classics that I come across, and things like that. But yeah, I agree that it's a fun idea. And again, there are some out there that did. If you search for that, you will see some stuff like that already. But let me see. Jonas says, I'll have to check out that author. I have mainly read sci-fi and want to branch out a little bit. Nice. Yeah, sci-fi is always fun too. I don't know why the murder mystery stuff always just kind of was fun for me. But let me see. GTI guy says it's more like it being a trademark of their brand, like a flat six to Porsche, as far as the Dodge thing earlier. Yeah, there's some of that too. But there was a long time though where Dodge, wasn't about V8s. I think obviously these past 20 years, absolutely that's a new move for them. They pivoted into that in the early 2000s largely. They again had some V8 stuff before that. They had the V8 and the Durango and all that before then. But as far as, this new attitude for Dodge, like, that's a 2000s thing. They had attitude in the 90s, but it was like, again, souped up neons and stuff like that. Which, by the way, is the other fun spot I saw this week. I forgot to mention earlier. I did see a non-trashed Dodge Neon SRT4, which is very rare to see an actual nice one, or any of them at all, honestly, but especially a nice one. I did a double take on that one this week, seeing a nice SRT4. It's been a solid 5 years probably since I've seen an SRT4 out and about. So that was fun. Anyway, Ryan says he's laughing at the Dodge customer digs. They're true. V8s might keep them in profit till 2030, but 2035 will come around and the brand will cease. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, who knows? I mean, again, Dodge is playing it like things won't come to an end. So maybe they're banking on this just being the permanent stance of America, and they might not be wrong. We'll see what happens, but typically that's not the way politics go. So we'll see. But anyway, it's interesting. Let me see. B. Mitchell said, hands down, the Charger and Challenger Hellcat crowd went to Durango Hellcats, as there are now other people that want to race and drive like morons. I won't disagree with that. And also, like a lot of this stuff, a lot of these people have, grown up and now they have families or whatever. And I mean, it's the same thing with a lot of the WRX crowd that's now driving Outback XTs, or they're now in, stuff that's a little more practical. Because you at some point probably want something a little bit bigger, especially than the older WRXs. And I mean, Subaru's done a good job of growing them to kind of keep up with that crowd a little bit. But I think that there are a lot of people that said, now I need a minivan, or I need a 3-row SUV or whatever. And now they're, loving Mazda CX-90s or whatever it is, And so I think there's definitely, a good bit of that. But you're probably right about them going to the Durangos if they need to buy something new, because that, never really stopped. Bonnie says, what's a good first manual car? A 4-door that's practical and comfortable yet fun. I live in New York. I would recommend a Honda Civic Si, especially depending on where your budget lands. Either go for the last non-turbo ones, which I think ended in 2014. So if you're on the lower end of the pricing spectrum, those are still fantastic. It might be hard to find one that's not been really rough and beat up, but if you can, maybe expand your search radius a little bit, or just, have a little bit of patience if you have that luxury, to wait for a nice one to come along, that would probably be my top recommendation. I always say that it's a great first car. It's a great first manual car because it's a light, easy clutch. The shifter is the most precise shifter you're going to get in anything, under at least 50 grand, and it's not so much power, or it's not, rear wheel drive, it can be a little tricky. If you're new to how cars handle, or, sporty driving, it's front wheel drive. There's really no surprises there. It's familiar, but you have the manual, you have a great motor, especially again in the non-turbo ones. Turbo ones, though, are very good too. I don't love the last generation. This current gen is great. The last gen had some rev hang I really was annoyed by. So I personally would skip the last gen. And so it's either go for the current gen, which started in 2022 if you can afford it, or go back to 2014 or earlier if you're okay with something that old. That's to me, just, it can't be beat in my mind as far as recommendations for that criteria. I mean, there are other options, of course, especially 4-door, though, it limits you a little bit. Honestly, it's really just Civic Si, because some of the others, like, you can go for a manual like a Elantra, N-Line, or something like that. Veloster Turbo you can get with a manual. And actually, the manual in the newest Veloster Turbo is actually pretty decent. So that could be a fun one too. It's pretty cheap, although that's technically 3 doors. But so Elantra N-Line had that manual for a while. Kia Forte GT had the manual as well. It's not as good of a manual as the Civic, though. So that's why, again, at the end of the day, all roads lead to Civic to me. You could also, if you're okay with a hatch, the Mazda 3 is great. I think the manual also was in the sedan for pre-2019s. So that could be another great first manual car. Those are fantastic. They run forever. I love Mazda 3s of all generations. So that would probably be the runner-up. If you can't go SI, go for a nice manual Mazda 3. I think it'd be a great, first car. Again, not going to blow your mind with speed, but fun, and the engagement of a manual, and practical, comfortable, all that, and a good first manual. So hopefully it helps you a little bit. And great question. Thanks for asking. And Let me see. So Edward says I really recently went from a Model 3 to an A6 e-tron for a daily. Nice. Well, great upgrade in my opinion. I mean, A6 e-tron seems so impressive. I just, was in the SQ6 e-tron. It's very, similar as far as interior and powertrain and stuff. And I love that thing. It was really, really impressive. And the A6 seems great too. I was gonna review one, but again, because of the changing tides here in America with EVs, I don't think I'd get any views on it because the SQ6 or SQ6 e-tron that even bombed. And no one watched it, so probably won't go out of my way to review it. I still may end up working it into the press fleet if I need to fill a gap or something in the future. But yeah, it's a great car. I mean, again, if I was reviewing cars I wanted to just do all the time and not stuff that I needed to get views on, I'd totally review the A6 because it seems great. I've heard good things about it too. Actually, the Audi dealer where I just did the 2017 A4, I asked the sales manager there, what's your loaner? What do you daily drive? And he said A6 e-tron. It's like, I love it. It's great. So yeah, they're really good cars, it seems. And let me see. Lee's Restoration Station says, as a redneck Ram owner myself, I was upset to see the old Hemi being used. Honestly, I'd buy the Hurricane in a heartbeat, but I need a regular cab, which is also considered antiquated. Yeah, I mean, regular cab too. I don't know. Yeah, it's a shame that has gone away because regular cab is, yeah. You think there would be a lot of traditional truck people that don't need four doors that would want that, but it seems to be so rare these days. And Brian says he saw a GT350 and an F-Type. Very nice. Always fun to see an F-Type. And let me see. A few more minutes here, so I'll try and get caught up here. But it seems like we've actually caught up pretty well. So maybe I've just killed the conversation with the tangents. I apologize. But last few questions here. So Mr. 705 says, in 2015, I bought a Civic manual, brand new, and never drove manual before. And the day I learned was the day I picked it up from the dealer. Nice. Another one of those stories. That's awesome. I went to the biggest hill I knew of straight away. That's the way to do it. Yeah, I was same experience, Mr. 705. And yeah, you figured it out, right? And now I'm sure you're fine and you're loving it. That's great. And kudos to you for taking that leap of faith as well. And Guardrail Racing says, thoughts on a used manual GTI Rabbit 2019 with 33,000 miles. So yeah, those Mark 7s, like everyone seems to universally praise them as being really good build quality, very good. Just people really appreciate that generation. And personally, I still like Mark 7. I think slightly better than Mark 8 from driving dynamics, from infotainment, all that kind of stuff. So Mark 7's where it's at. So I think that's, you're on the right track there. The only thing I'll say is, they often have some electrical gremlins, and there's like jokes in the Volkswagen community, like, oh, if you don't have at least one light on the dash, like your car's not on or something, like some kind of joke like around those themes. And so, just be prepared that you might have some silly lights you need to, get figured out. Make sure you buy like a OBD2 reader, to clear codes that are probably up for no reason and things like that. So there might be a little bit of extra effort involved, but that, again, a lot of European stuff has that same problem. And there are some other non-European stuff too that can have that, but typically the Europeans have a lot more of that, and so I think that's a great choice though. I think, they're great cars. I actually know someone who daily drives a Mark 7 currently, and they love it. Really happy with it. And so, yeah, I think that'd probably be a pretty good buy, as long as, again, the one you find, make sure it's, had regular maintenance is done and good maintenance records and it's been cared for well. But as long as it's been one that's been cared for well, I mean, I'm assuming a 2019 with only 33,000 miles has probably had a pretty easy life if it's been doing roughly 5,000 miles a year. So yeah, sounds like a pretty nice car potentially, and hopefully it helps you a little bit. And Lantern Tail says Tesla doesn't even offer partial full self-driving. There's no cruise control. It's $8,000 extra, only 3 colors, black, gray, and white. They also removed the front trunk lining, so it's all wires. They also took out coat hooks and removed the seat controls. They shifted that to the touchscreen. Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah, I didn't know all that because I honestly didn't care enough to look into it. But I mean, I guess they got to cut the pricing, but you can still have all that stuff again in a Nissan Leaf and not feel like you're in some, science project penalty box kind of thing. Interesting. And Robert says, why don't BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and Acura no longer have displays at U.S. auto shows? I think they just didn't think it was necessary. It's really expensive to put up those auto show displays. This is why Stellantis also, kind of took a break from car shows. They still do the regional stuff, but they, weren't doing any big debuts or anything like that. And it's really just, it's a lot of money. We're talking millions of dollars to put up those big displays and the big screens, millions of dollars to like have that. And then you tear it all down in a week, it's an investment. And I do think that it's important. And I think especially local auto shows where you can go and sit in cars without having a salesman breathing down your neck and asking you stupid questions, it's very nice. And so hopefully they keep, because I know at least the Pittsburgh Auto Show does have Mercedes representation and Audi. I don't know about Acura or BMW, but actually no, they do have BMW, and Acura I think they have, but as far as like the big like media auto shows and that kind of stuff and having reveals, it just they don't need to. That's what they figured out with COVID is, with that whole era of not having car shows, they realized that it's cheaper to just fly 20 or 30 of their favorite journalists out, film stuff, get the coverage that way, and have the same impact, show the car to everyone, and then you can again do the local auto show circuit if you want to show something, but as far as getting the info out there, that's all they needed to do. And that's why, again, a lot of my car reviewer buddies are burned out because we used to just go fly somewhere to drive a car, and now we're going to fly somewhere to show the car for its first, look, and then you got to come back 3 months later or however many months it is later, and then you get to drive it and talk about it. And, so it's double the trips. It's everyone's flight schedules, everyone's, time commitments have been doubled by all these car companies that have done that. And, that's why, it's burning out a lot of us. And I know, many car reviewers that are just skipping a lot of stuff because they're just like, look, I'm tired of flying every week. I need to be home and be with people I, have here at home and stuff. And so, but I think it's just cheaper to not do it is the bottom line there. And also, the exclusivity, you can also argue that makes it more exclusive. Now you might actually lose out on people who want to just check stuff out and would have been buyers. So I don't know how, waterproof that argument is, but I think that has been part of the angle as well. I was like, oh, we just don't need it. And it's kind of like the, la-di-da kind of approach to doing it. And Alex, thanks for saying hi and stopping by. And the OK Spaces says, looking on Auto Trader for random vehicles that pop into my head. Crazy to see that you can pick up a Polestar 1 for $100,000 off of its MSRP. That is crazy. I haven't looked at Polestar 1s in forever, but interesting. I'll have to look at those in a little bit here. Thanks for sharing, OK Spaces. And Lantern Tail says, what's your junkyard channel called? It's called Relics of the Rust Belt. And it is also featured as a featured channel under this channel. So if you go to the Maran Motoring homepage here, you scroll down, there should be a featured channels bar, I think at the bottom or somewhere. And it's on there as well. But Relics of the Rust Belt is what it's called. Thanks for asking, Lantern. And let me see. CB Mitchell's recommending the Elantra as well with a 5-speed, easy to drive, and they're now disposable. Absolutely. And especially if you just want to, I don't know if that'd be a very fun car, but at least having the manual is fun and the engagement of that. But yeah, if you just want to try and, again, learn a manual, that's going to be, something like that, a little beater you can, drive and, screw it up and not feel bad about it. That's kind of the best way to do it, I think. And Vishal says, do you still plan on reviewing base trim of the Jetta or other base trim cars? Yes, that is something I'm still actively investigating. It's just being very selective about the cars I'm doing. Base Jetta, I looked more into it after we had our discussion in one of the prior lives about it. There aren't too many people, but there have been a few who have done coverage of base Jettas. So I think even 2026 is like people have already beat me to the punch on that. Now I could still do it and, probably still have some success, but I'm really trying to find the path of least resistance of stuff that has the minimal amount of competition, if any at all. and really try to, maximize the stuff. And I mean, I've actually found like, so an example, like I did that Hyundai Sonata that was the SEL Sport. And that I was kind of disappointed in the views initially. I thought it would kind of, do better because it was the first video on YouTube of a 2026 Sonata and that trim, which is also new for 2026. And I was like, oh, this is going to be, guaranteed to be a good video. And it didn't do well in the first week or two, but it's slowly starting to climb. And I've noticed some of my slow growers, they sometimes end up actually doing the best because they might not get a bunch of views right up front, like something that's more exciting, but those exciting ones, they get a bunch of views and then they drop off and just die a lot of times. And stuff like that's not, it's slowly inching up, and they start to kind of go upwards on this curve and end up being the ones that get 100,000 views in a year or two. So that's kind of, it's the long game, but I'm trying to again try and find those models. And Jetta might be too oversaturated. I haven't rolled it out. I think there's a couple others I have my eye on first to possibly do. But I see Section says, in my opinion, first isn't always the best. That's true. And also, a lot of because there are some channels that really, I mean, if you search for, 2026 review of some oddball car or something, there's probably one of 3 channels that are really good about being the first to go to the dealer and get one of the first 2026s or the first new model year or something. But they're not the best videos. A lot of times they're not even driving them, or they're very, they churn out, 3 videos a day or whatever, and it's not super high quality stuff. So I do think that, yes, I could do a better video, and there's just some things I could improve for sure. So I agree, being the first isn't always the best. But it is important on YouTube. And I've found that a lot of my biggest hits that were being the first, or, finding something where there isn't competition. I mean, that's why the V8 Miata video, that did very well, predictably, with many of you who I'm sure were like, oh, this, Matt's going to be having a great time in this car. Let's watch it. And a V8 Miata is certainly appealing, but it's the fact that no one had posted a single V8 Miata video in like 4 years of any V8 Miata, and all, like, as far as actual reviews and, not just some random little thing, but like an actual well done video on a V8 Miata. And then I was the first person to drive it outside of the people who built the car. I was the first reviewer to drive an ND V8 Miata, and that clearly paid off. I mean, that video is like over 800,000 views over slightly over a year and a half or so. So that reiterated the power of like no competition, first out of the gate with something, and having it be the sweet spot of being something that also appeals to a lot of my subscribers, and also, is in line with, what I've kind of built the channel on for a long time. So that's kind of why I'm trying to juggle, that's the ideal thing, is something that's exciting, hopefully, which isn't always the case with some of these things like Sonata, but, exciting, first out of the gate, and little competition is kind of the way to the success that I've been seeing recently. But I don't know. We'll see how things go again with the car market and how it develops here over the rest of the year. I may, do more used stuff if those seem to be successful. I might just go backwards though and just start doing older stuff that's, more exciting if people are just not interested in new cars or newer stuff. That's kind of where I might go backwards. But I think there's a limit to that too, because going backwards, there's been some of these fun enthusiast cars that still haven't done super well. So it's, again, trying to find just the right car is always the bottom line. It's tough. And I see Fook says growers not showers, right? That's it. And Section says I know TFL is the usual first of the punch, but their production quality is extremely low. Usually bad info and bad audio, not to pick them specifically, but it's par for the course. Interesting. I mean, TFL, at least they're a pretty big outfit, and I haven't watched a video super recently of theirs, but they, at least, I mean, I know them. They're very nice people. I haven't seen anything where they've been super off, but regardless, the stuff that I'm seeing is like people that, again, are going to dealers. The thumbnail isn't good. The video isn't high quality. The people don't really know how to review a car outside of just reading the brochure. And pointing at features, and so, I mean, but that's enough for a lot of people, clearly, because these people are getting views on this stuff, and it's work for them to just churn out 3 videos a day that are all just, hey, let's walk around a car in a dealer lot, and I have a review, and it's like, it's not really a review, but that's very popular. So trying to just, do the best video I can, and also be fairly early. But again, it doesn't always work. That's not a perfect formula, so that's why I'm still trying to desperately figure this out before I got to give up on YouTube. But it's tough because there's a lot of these channels, again, with low production value that just get tons of views, and views are what pay the bills, and I'm not getting them. So I gotta figure it out fast. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to keep on chipping away at it and see if I can break out of this glass ceiling I'm under here. And let me see. Vishal says, I got reminded of it because when I went to get my check engine light looked at, they had some 2026 Jettas on the lot. I'm more curious to see your take on the 1.5 Jetta. That's all. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, you'll probably get a decent opinion out of my Taos review because I did the Taos SE, which is a little bit lower trim, that same powertrain and stuff. But hopefully the Jetta's, a little bit better, because Taos is still okay, but not my favorite by any stretch in the segment. So, but yeah, no, I mean, Jettas are still a really good seller. And again, it's one I certainly have in my back pocket. But I know time's ticking with the 2026s before, again, everyone else, is all over them. So yeah, I have one or two others I probably want to do first, but base Jetta is still on the list of stuff to hopefully do here soon. Because I do have a passion for those affordable cars. And I think that's gonna be more important than ever as we continue on with this economy. But anyway, so Section said, I had a 25 Jetta in Florida for a rental, presumably the same as the 26. Don't know. Yeah, it's the same, I think, pretty much. 43 mpg average, but the turbo lag was atrocious. Interesting. So yeah, I wonder if throttle tuning is still not great, because that's the thing that irks me about even the Tiguan. I talked about that a lot in that Tiguan review. Just Volkswagen doesn't understand how to do good powertrain calibration anymore. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's an efficiency thing. I mean, maybe it's, to get that 43 mpg. I don't know, but even some of the Audis I've complained about, it's not very well done. And I don't know what happened to all our powertrain engineers, if they just brought in a bunch of interns or what happened, because it's just like something's amiss with the way that's set up in some of those. So it's unfortunate if the Jetta has that too. I'll have to try it out and see. Because now I'm curious. You're making me more curious to try it out for myself, Section. And YH says, just came back from a spirited drive. People need to stop driving Explorers and other cop cars. That is always tricky. Yeah, I'm always keeping an eye on that. Because, you never really know. You see a white Explorer and it's like, I don't know. Or a black Explorer. It's really, really tricky sometimes. The good hack, if I think it's the same in Canada, is police cruiser Explorers, according to my knowledge, don't blame me if this isn't totally true, but it seems like Explorers that are police vehicles don't have roof racks. I don't believe they're sold with roof racks, because that would get in the way of the mounting they need to do for the light bars on the roof. So I'm pretty sure no actual police cruiser Explorer has a roof rack. So that's always been the thing that I've looked for, is a roof rack recently. I just learned about that like a year or two ago, but that might help you a little bit. Maybe there are some with roof racks around you. I don't know, but that's at least here in the States, that seems to be the way it goes. And Michelle says, I have a 24 model, and I agree with you. Section, the turbo lag is annoying at times, but owning it, you get used to modulating the throttle to where it isn't bad all the time. That's good. You can learn it. And I kind of figured eventually that'd be, because I mean, they still sell large numbers. If it was truly terrible, no one would buy them, or they'd be all dumping them on these markets. So clearly it's something you can adapt to. It's unfortunate people have to adapt, because other cars don't make you do that, but it's livable. And if the other parts of the car, make it worthwhile, it's just different for everybody. But yeah, thanks for the info on yours there, Vishal. I definitely want to try it out here now. And YH says, we have F-150 and Caravan undercovers here as well. I usually smell bacon, so I can tell. But that's good. Anyway, so last couple of questions here. We'll head out here. So Section says, outside of the S and RS, models. Volkswagen Auto Group was lost it. The Jetta really was genuinely bad, like scary bad. Went to merge from a stop, sold 3 seconds of nothing, then it lit the tires up. Outside of that, though, for the SE for the extremely low 20s, I did really like it. Yeah, and that was my complaint with Tiguan is again just it was really bad with the just 3 seconds, and I counted and people were mad at me in the Tiguan review. They're like, that wasn't 3 seconds. I'm like, even if the stopwatch doesn't match me saying 1, 2, 3, like it's still like I'm having time to count numbers. That's the problem here, even if the timing isn't exactly right. Like it's just it's kind of crazy. And yeah, some of the Audi stuff's like that. They're not the only ones. Acura has struggled with this a little bit in the past. I think they've improved it pretty well, but some of the earlier stuff was the same way with those Type S's, where it was like transmission is sitting there thinking for a few seconds, and it's like, all right, no one's home. I'm just hanging out here, waiting to not get rear-ended, hopefully. But yeah, it's interesting. And let me see. B. Mitchell says Volkswagen and powertrain tunes. My buddy with the Volkswagen ID4, who was an IT engineer for 3M, says that Volkswagen does software engineering by contractor committee. It's a mishmash of everyone involved. Really? That's surprising. I don't know if that's just the EV side or if it's because honestly, I mean, the ID4 is one of the few things that does actually have good throttle response thanks to it being electric. We talked about this a long time ago as well about, which cars can best benefit from electrification. And it's the stuff that they can't figure out powertrain calibration on, like a lot of these Volkswagens. And as a result, like Volkswagen ID Buzz, I have no complaints with throttle because it's instant. And, even they apparently seem to have no issue figuring out that an electric vehicle, going to have a nice responsive throttle. Same with ID4. Maybe his is bad, but I mean, ID4, whenever I had it, it was very smooth. It wasn't very exciting, but it was smooth at least and predictable. And I didn't, wonder where the power was and when it was going to, kick on. So yeah, that's why honestly, like Volkswagen Group stuff, again, outside of, some of the S and RS models, if I'm buying Volkswagen Group, I'm going to go electric. Just because that throttle response. I mean, maybe I'd learn to live with it too, but that would drive me crazy. That Tiguan. Oh man, that was it's such a nice car. Everything else is nice. Literally, Tiguan is as close to perfection as Volkswagen has ever gotten in a mass market product, at least in this decade. That is the one thing. Everything else, 10 out of 10, so good. But that's not good. Anyway, Steve Vishal says, I agree with the criticisms. We have a 2016 Passat. The throttle tuning is great in that car. Clearly stuff has happened since then. Absolutely. Yeah, because I agree. It is a more recent thing. It wasn't always like this. And it doesn't have to be this way, So, yeah. And I really do think a lot of it is efficiency stuff. If you delay throttle and you don't give people a super jumpy throttle, they're going to use less gas. And even when you're doing EPA testing or things like that, it's gonna even a tester or a test program, if you give it a jumpy throttle, you're going to get a worse rating probably. So I think there's some of that at play for sure. It'd be interesting to see if they don't have to worry about fuel economy here for the next couple of years in the States. I mean, I guess you still have to compete as far as MPG, window sticker ratings. But as far as, fines and stuff go, they may be willing to loosen up a little bit on that and make it less efficient. And maybe that'll fix the throttle. I don't know. I'd be curious to see if they try that or not. They probably won't because it's a global car for most of these and they can't tune stuff usually that differently for America. But I don't know. We'll see. I see Vishal says, thanks for the stream and take care. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vishal. I see Section says, I loathe them, but I wonder if something like a pedal commander or the Superior Banks pedal monster would fix that. Yeah, probably those types of things. Again, if you can, mess with the throttle, I mean, that does open up other cans of worms as far as, because a lot of times some of those things like play with boost and stuff, maybe you could choose not to do that and just have it fix throttle response. But those things are definitely kind of iffy, and that's a guaranteed way to get your warranty denied if something goes wrong as well. I mean, you can remove it pretty easily, but they can usually look at the logs and say, our throttle is not supposed to do this, and kind of put two and two together. But yeah, potentially that could be kind of a solution for sure. Yeah, interesting. But anyway, thank you all so much for hanging out here. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Apologies again for all the little tangents and rants, but hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, hopefully I'll be back in time on Wednesday to do a live. We'll see. But if nothing else, stay tuned for, again, hopefully a junkyard video here in the next day or two. I'm going to have another more rare used car review here coming out probably tomorrow, might be Tuesday, depending on how things go. And some more good stuff here coming later this week as well. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Have a great, safe, happy, healthy week. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much again. And yeah, take care, everyone.